Chapter 3449. Although the heavenly smelting divine craftsman purposely infuriated Jiang Tianyi and forced Jiang Tianyi to become enemies with Bai Feng, causing Bai Feng to be extremely dissatisfied, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was like a fox assuming the tiger's might. However, there was no turning back. Bai Feng had already brought people to surround the palace of heaven's will. Naturally, she would not let him off so easily. In addition, Jiang Tianyi's attitude was very arrogant and he even threatened him in front of everyone. Even more so, he could not shrink back. Otherwise, he would lose all of his dignity as an area master. Jiang Tianyi stared at Bai Feng and said in a solemn tone, "This king's name is Tianyi, surname Jiang." Bai Feng's eyes narrowed when she heard the word Jiang. Her heart skipped a beat and she had a bad feeling about this. He glared at Jiang Tianyi and asked in a low voice, "What do you mean?" Without waiting for Jiang Tianyi to reply, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman laughed wildly and said, "Ha! Too laughable. Look at you putting on an act, you really think you're something. Jiang Tianyi? What kind of lousy name was that? This prince has never heard of it before. Even if you have some fame in other regions, this is the Fire Mulberry region. White Phoenix region lord has the final say. Do you think you can intimidate Domain Lord White Phoenix with just your name? Do you think White Phoenix Domain Lord is a 3-year-old child?" The heavenly smelting divine craftsman pointed at Jiang Tianyi and scolded arrogantly, "Little brat, don't even think about threatening Domain Lord Bai Feng, even if you were a Domain Lord." In the eyes of the 200,000 soldiers and several hundred divine lords, there was nothing wrong with the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's attitude. As citizens of the Fire Mulberry domain, they naturally had to protect Domain Lord White Phoenix and fight against Jiang Tianyi together. However, no one would have thought that Bai Feng was already unable to restrain her anger. She wanted nothing more than to tear the divine craftsman's mouth apart. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's intentions were too obvious. He was forcing Bai Feng and Jiang Tianyi to become enemies, not giving them any chance to ease the tension between them. "Tianyi, shut up." Bai Feng was at the end of her patience and she shouted angrily with a dark face. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman smiled awkwardly and nodded in agreement. Jiang Tianyi glanced at the heavenly smelting divine craftsman with a mocking gaze and sneered, "Old thing, you're finished." After saying that, he ignored the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's venomous gaze and continued to speak to Bai Feng. "I come from the heavenly south and live in the divine attraction grotto heaven. I am now the Jiang clan's 7th young master." Jiang Tianyi believed that Bai Feng should have understood by now. This was indeed the case. Bai Feng immediately frowned and her pupils constricted. Dense shock flashed in her eyes. The Jiang clan of the divine attraction paradise? The others did not understand. Ordinary god kings did not understand. However, Bai Feng knew very well what this meant. "My guess is right. It is indeed the Jiang clan." No wonder he could ruthlessly humiliate the heavenly smelting divine craftsman with such an arrogant attitude. The Jiang clan. One of the ancient clans, one of the clans that is most proficient in the art of refining. Their strength is immeasurable. Bai Feng muttered to herself with a rather solemn expression. She was hesitating and weighing the pros and cons in her heart. In fact, he was also a disciple of an ancient clan. He came from the divine Phoenix Grotto heaven and was a descendant of the Phoenix race. It was precisely because of this that he knew better than anyone just how powerful and terrifying the ancient clans were. Even though the present boundless heaven continent was ruled by the Azura God Emperor, the Emperor Lord revered by billions of living beings. However, the foundation and status of the 18 ancient clans were not inferior to the Azura God Emperor. Most of the time, the Azura God Emperor was also wary of the ancient clans and was not willing to easily interfere in the grudges between the ancient clans. Furthermore, the 18 ancient clans also had a corresponding tacit understanding and agreement between themselves. Ever since the Azura God Emperor unified boundless heaven continent, the various ancient clans became even more united and formed an alliance. Only in this way would they not be disintegrated, divided, and ultimately subdued by the Azura God Emperor. Bai Feng had some understanding of the Jiang clan, so she stared at Jiang Tianyi and observed carefully. Jiang Tianyi's appearance and bloodline aura showed that he was indeed a disciple of the Jiang clan. Bai Feng had to consider how to deal with this matter. The other party was a disciple of the Jiang clan and the most outstanding young genius. Of course, she could not easily become enemies with him. Otherwise, the Jiang clan and the Phoenix race would become enemies because of this and affect the unity of the ancient clan alliance. If the Phoenix race pursued the matter, he, as the Fire Mulberry region lord, would bear the brunt and definitely be severely punished. However, the current situation was very awkward. Both sides were at daggers drawn. As the Fire Mulberry region lord, he could not take the initiative to back down and admit defeat. Otherwise, not only would it damage the Phoenix race's reputation, but it would also damage the region lord's dignity and make him a laughingstock. Bai Feng was still considering how to resolve the situation in front of her without hurting the harmony and losing face. However, when the heavenly smelting divine craftsman saw that she was hesitating, he had a bad feeling and was filled with anxiety. Damn it! Bai Feng is actually frightened. Could it be that the brat's background is really very strong? This won't do. I cannot let Bai Feng back down. Otherwise, how can I have a chance to take revenge? Furthermore, I have already become enemies with Jiang Tianyi. Even if I don't take revenge on him, he definitely won't let me off. Thinking of this, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman made a decision. He laughed disdainfully and pointed at Jiang Tianyi and mocked, "Brat, what's so great about having the surname Jiang? Just in this flowing river pass, I can find a few thousand people with the surname Jiang for you. I don't care what kind of backing or background you have. Today you must be investigated by White Feng Region Lord. As long as you collude with those fugitives, you should be punished as well." White Feng Region Lord was personally appointed by His Majesty the God Emperor. No matter how strong your backing is, can it be stronger than His Majesty the God Emperor? Not only did you disobey the investigation, you even threatened the Region Lord. Such actions are going against His Majesty the God Emperor's rule. It is equivalent to rebellion. Following the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's voice, it spread throughout the entire flowing river pass. The 200,000 soldiers and hundreds of god monarchs all expressed their agreement. Everyone was agitated and felt a strong sense of pride in their hearts. Even the Fire Mulberry Emperor was incited. Only Qin Yi and Wu Shui realized that something was wrong. They kept staring at Bai Feng's reaction, waiting for his orders. Seeing that the soldiers' fighting spirit had been ignited, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman no longer hesitated and shouted loudly, "Soldiers, protect the Fire Mulberry region. It is time to be loyal to His Majesty the God Emperor. Break into the bandits' palace and help the region lord and lord messenger search for the fugitives. Kill." Following his order, the 100,000 soldiers surrounding the Palace of Heavens could no longer suppress their fighting spirit and killing intent. They all waved their swords and sabers and attacked. Swish, swish, swish. Rumble, rumble. In the next moment, hundreds of thousands of light blades and divine art shadows flooded the Palace of Heavens like a flood. The terrifying divine art torrent fiercely bombarded the Golden Palace, producing a deafening sound. The soldiers' fighting spirit surged as they attacked without caring about their own safety. However, Bai Feng was shocked and angry. He glared at the heavenly smelting divine craftsman and shouted angrily, "Bastard! This king will not forgive you for acting on your own initiative." The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's thoughts had been seen through, so he naturally felt guilty. However, what was done could not be undone. The war had already begun and he had achieved his goal. Facing Bai Feng's reprimand, he sneered in his heart, but he pretended to be innocent. "Region Lord, I only stood out to say a few words of justice to protect you and His Majesty the God Emperor's dignity. Don't accuse me wrongly. Look, the soldiers are all filled with righteous indignation. They are willing to risk their lives for you." Chapter 3450. Divine King White Phoenix nearly vomited blood. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's intentions were clear, but he still pretended to be innocent and loyal. If not for everyone present, Divine King White Phoenix really wanted to cripple him. Since the battle had begun, White Phoenix and the Jiang clan had already become enemies. He could only make the best of it. As the ruler of a region, the greatest taboo was to be overcautious and indecisive. However, Divine King White Phoenix was not willing to be used by the heavenly smelting divine craftsman like this and would not charge forward. He pointed at the Palace of Heavens amidst the divine art torrent and ordered the heavenly smelting divine craftsman, "Didn't you want to kill your enemy? Now that he's in front of you, go kill him. If you can't kill him, this king will kill you." The heavenly smelting divine craftsman immediately trembled in fright. He knew that he was too hasty and had already offended Divine King White Phoenix. But he did not expect Divine King White Phoenix to be so angry. This made him have to guess and mutter, "The matter is actually so serious? That Jiang Brat's backer is so powerful that even White Phoenix is afraid? So, then if I kill him I will definitely suffer the Jiang clan's revenge." At this moment the heavenly smelting divine craftsman felt a little regretful. After all, he was also afraid that the Jiang clan's power was too great. He could not withstand the Jiang clan's revenge at all. But an arrow on the bow had to be shot. Divine King White Phoenix stared at him and kept urging him. Seeing that he was still hesitating and considering, Divine King White Phoenix actually took out a divine saber, his entire body bursting with fierce killing intent. Looking at that posture, if he still did not attack Jiang Tianyi, Divine King White Phoenix would start with him. Helpless, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman could only brace himself, take out a divine spear and attack the palace of heaven's will. Kill. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman roared. Holding the scarlet divine spear with both hands, he stabbed out 81 times consecutively, attacking the palace of heaven's will. At this time the palace of heaven's will was enduring the furious attacks of 100,000 defenders and was violently shaking. The palace of heaven's will had many defensive arrays, and all of them were activated, forming 4 layers of incomparably thick shields. Hundreds of thousands of divine art attacks, like a storm, struck the 5-colored shields, creating deafening explosions, but ultimately failed to break through the shields. As for the divine palace within the shield, it was completely unscathed. Jiang Tianyi flew out of the divine palace and did not need the protection of the defensive array. His entire body was glowing with dark golden divine light. He wore a magnificent golden divine armor and stood in the dusky sky. No matter how many attacks landed on his body, they couldn't hurt him at all. He held a pitch-black meteoric iron divine bow in his left hand, while he took out talismans one after another in his right hand. These talismans turned into silver arrows and shot towards the crowd around him. Boom! Every single silver arrow that flew out was like a shooting star that fell into the battle formation of the defending army. It erupted with silver divine flames that covered the heavens and the earth, and it erupted with an enormous explosion that shook the heavens and the earth. The power of each arrow was enough to destroy everything within a radius of a few thousand miles. The destructive power was extremely terrifying. The arrows exploded in the crowd, and the silver divine flames instantly engulfed hundreds and thousands of defenders, reaping one life after another. Any defender that was engulfed by the silver divine flames was burned to ashes and dregs. Not even a single bone was left. Even the divine lords in the battle formation would die on the spot after being engulfed by the silver divine flames, let alone the majority of celestial gods. Apart from divine kings, no one could block his divine arrows. Boom boom boom. At this moment, the 81 spear lights shot out by the divine craftsman struck the divine palace of heaven's will's barrier with an earth-shattering explosion. The spear lights shattered, but the barrier remained intact. It was simply too difficult for the divine craftsman, a lesser divine king, to break through a mid-king level defensive array with his strength. The divine craftsman was very unconvinced, so he used all his strength to attack the divine palace of heaven's will. But the result was the same. The barrier of divine light that seemed to be only 2 feet thick was still intact. Jiang Tianyi had already shot out more than 200 arrows, slaughtering 34,000 defenders. In just a few dozen breaths, a third of the army of 100,000 had been slaughtered. Such ferocious divine might not only intimidated the surviving 60,000 defenders, but it also filled them with fear. Even divine King White Phoenix, Qin Yi Wuxia, and the others had grave and sinister expressions. Damn it! We have to hold him back or else the army of 100,000 won't be enough to kill him. Divine King White Phoenix frowned and gave the order. Qin Yi Wuxia and Emperor Huasong acknowledged the order at the same time. They waved their weapons and attacked Jiang Tianyi. 6 gods domineering blade. Red lotus sky opening strike. Mountain shattering divine sword. The 3 used all their strength and used powerful killing moves to attack Jiang Tianyi from different directions. The divine craftsman saw that continuing to attack the divine palace of heaven's will was futile, so he turned and attacked Jiang Tianyi. Stormwind fire spear. Heavenly smelting divine craftsman roared angrily. He held the divine spear with both hands and stabbed out spear shadows that filled the sky. He released dozens of laws and divine powers, forming wind, fire and lightning that filled the sky. Jiang Tianyi could ignore the attacks of tens of thousands of soldiers and focus on killing the defenders. However, he couldn't ignore the attacks of 3 divine kings and a peak divine lord. Facing the divine arts of the 4 experts, he flipped the meteoric metal divine bow in his left hand and released pitch-black ripples that expanded like a whirlpool. He threw out a giant palm with his right hand and clashed with the 4 experts. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, a deafening muffled sound burst out and resounded through the sky. The divine spells of the 4 powerhouses were all shattered by the giant golden palm. The destructive shockwaves were absorbed by the mysterious ripples and merged into 4 water tank-sized light balls that flew back at an even faster speed toward the divine craftsman Qin Yi and the others. Such a situation caused the 4 experts to be horrified. They didn't expect Jiang Tianyi to react so quickly and have such rich battle experience. He used one move to not only resolve their attacks but also counterattack. This was truly frightening. The divine craftsman Qin Yi and the others all defended as if they were facing a great enemy. All kinds of defensive shields, armors and defensive secret techniques were used. Bang, 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 bang. Emperor Huasong was the first to be sent flying. Although he had raised his defense to the extreme, he was still a peak divine lord. The difference in strength between him and a middle-level divine king was too great. The power of that colorful ball of light had long since exceeded the limits of what he could endure. When he was hit, he didn't even have the slightest resistance and was sent flying hundreds of miles away with blood spurting out of his 7 orifices. Not only were his arms broken, but there was also a big hole in his chest. Blood kept coming out of his mouth. Emperor Huasong only felt a lingering fear after suffering such a serious injury. He was glad that he had survived the disaster. It's too scary. Fortunately, I defended with all my strength and survived. Otherwise, I would have been killed instantly. Sogu. Chapter 3451. Emperor Huasong was well aware. With his strength in front of Jiang Tianyi, he could not even withstand one move. If he braced himself and charged forward to fight, he would only end up turning into ashes. Therefore, he took the opportunity of being heavily injured, his hair disheveled, face covered in blood, and rushed in front of Bai Feng. Domain Lord, subordinate. Subordinate is no match for that Jiang clan thief. He is at least a middle-level god king. Emperor Huasong did not tidy up his ragged clothes and hair, nor did he wipe away the blood on his face, looking very miserable and disheveled. Even when he spoke, he was at his last gasp, looking like he would not live for long. Divine King Bai Feng glanced at him, waved his hand and said, "Since you are heavily injured, then withdraw and heal." Emperor Huasong was naturally happy that Domain Lord did not send him to his death. But he was rather smart, bowed and thanked and said in a firm tone, "Domain Lord, although subordinate is heavily injured, the soldiers are still fighting a bloody battle. How can subordinate cower? Even if subordinate is heavily injured, subordinate also has to contribute to Domain Lord. Subordinate will go to the star-killing array, personally preside over the operation of the grand array, and assist Domain Lord to kill the enemy." Emperor Huasong would do this. Divine King Bai Feng was not surprised. After all, Emperor Huasong was promoted by him, he knew him very well. "Right you go." Divine King Bai Feng nodded in agreement. Emperor Huasong acknowledged the order, hurriedly bowed and retreated, flying towards the divine array 4,000 miles away. Until now, he dared to circulate his skill to suppress his injuries, hurriedly consumed a divine pill to heal. On the other side, divine craftsman Sky Smelting, Qin Yi, and Wuxia had been trying their best to besiege Jiang Tianyi, but ultimately had no effect. Although Qin Yi and Wuxia were middle-level god kings, they were only 4th-level god king realm. Not to mention divine craftsman Sky Smelting, he was just a 3rd-degree realm low-level god king. And Jiang Tianyi was the leader among middle-level god kings. His strength reached 6th-level god king realm. Divine craftsman Sky Smelting was obsessed with the path of refining. His combat power was not outstanding. No matter how he attacked with all his strength, it was no different from scratching an itch to Jiang Tianyi. Qin Yi and Wu Shui's attacks could barely threaten Jiang Tianyi. But Jiang Tianyi could resolve their besiegement with a little trick. The two sides fought for 100 breaths of time, but Jiang Tianyi was still unharmed. On the other hand, Divine craftsmen Tianyi, Qinyi and Wuxia were all heavily injured. This was especially true for the divine blacksmith, who had been heavily taken care of by Jiang Tianyi. He had long been beaten beyond recognition and was covered in blood. If not for divine King White Phoenix watching from afar, he would have had thoughts of retreating long ago and wanted to withdraw from the battle circle. He felt that if this continued he would soon be killed by Jiang Tianyi. There was nothing he could do. Jiang Tianyi was targeting him too much. During the battle, there were clearly better opportunities to heavily injure Qinyi or Wuxia. But Jiang Tianyi wanted to deal with him. On the surface, it looked like the three of them were attacking Jiang Tianyi. Everyone was putting in the same amount of effort and danger. But in reality Qinyi and Wuxia were relatively safe. He was in the most dangerous situation. The two sides fought for a while and the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's injuries became even more miserable. Not only was his left arm chopped off, but there were also dozens of bloody holes in his chest and back. His internal organs and blood were flowing out together. Not only did he look miserable but his strength had also greatly decreased and he only had about 50% of his combat strength left. Under such circumstances he could not hold on anymore. But he did not dare to turn around and flee. He could only seek help from Divine King White Phoenix not far away. Domain Lord, Your Excellency, save me. This guy's strength is too strong. If you still don't make a move, not only will I be killed by him, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers will also die. Your Excellency, it's nothing if I die in battle for you. But those hundreds of thousands of soldiers are all your most loyal subjects. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's voice was very loud, spreading throughout the entire flowing Chuan Pass. Not only did the remaining 40,000 defending troops on the battlefield hear it, the 100,000 defending troops around flowing Chuan Pass also heard it clearly. Everyone's gazes gathered on Divine King White Phoenix. That's right, Jiang Tianyi's strength was terrifyingly powerful. An entire 100,000 defending troops besieged him, but in such a short time, more than half of them were slaughtered by him. Heavenly smelting Qinyi and Wuxia besieged him with all their might but could not do anything to him. Instead they were beaten until their injuries were miserable. The defending troops' morale was low, everyone on tenterhooks. If Divine King White Phoenix still did not make a move, the hundreds of thousands of defending troops would probably be discouraged. Now the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was shouting at the top of his lungs again. He even said that it was fine if he died but did not want the hundreds of thousands of soldiers to die. This was equivalent to threatening White Phoenix in front of everyone. If he still did not make a move, he was ignoring the hundreds of thousands of soldiers. You damned dog. Too despicable. White Phoenix was so angry that even his face turned green, roaring furiously in his heart. Chapter 3452. Bam! Amidst a deafening explosion, Jiang Tianyi was sent flying backwards. The multicolored divine light shield collapsed, splashing out fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the sun. The golden divine armor he was wearing had deep dents on his shoulders and chest. He was still flying in the night sky and his face was pale. Blood was flowing out of his nose and mouth. Even though he was at the 6th level of the Divine King realm, he could easily kill Tianyi, Qinyi and Wuxia. However, there was still a big gap between him and a 7th level Divine King. Divine King White Phoenix injured him with her first move. Even though it was only a light injury, he was sent flying dozens of miles away. He looked quite miserable. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers who were originally low in morale cheered excitedly. Their morale was back to its peak. Not only the tens of thousands of soldiers who were fighting, even the 100,000 soldiers who were guarding the divine array around Manchuan Pass were excited. Taking this opportunity, the Emperor of Fire Mulberry Tree hurriedly led the divine monarchs and shouted in admiration, "The Domain Lord is mighty." The Emperor of Fire Mulberry Tree led the cheers and the tens of thousands of soldiers echoed. Soon hundreds of thousands of people shouted in unison. A deafening sound wave spread throughout a radius of several tens of thousands of miles, shaking until the entire flowing creek pass started trembling. At this moment, Divine King White Phoenix's majesty was undeniable. Qinyi and Wuxia did not dare to delay and continued to attack Jiang Tianyi. Tianyi Divine Craftsman took this opportunity to retreat 1,000 miles away. He hurriedly took a divine pill and healed himself. Divine King White Phoenix was not in a hurry to kill Jiang Tianyi. She glanced at Tianyi Divine Craftsman coldly and a cold light flashed in her eyes. She had decided that after she finished off Jiang Tianyi tonight, she would not let Tianyi Divine Craftsman off. This old thing has been domineering in the Fire Mulberry Tree region for nearly 10,000 years. How dare you play tricks in front of me? If I don't teach you an unforgettable lesson, how can you control the billions of people in the future? At this moment, Jiang Tianyi resisted the attacks of the 40,000 soldiers and 2 divine kings while he shouted angrily at Divine King White Phoenix. White Phoenix, do you really want to take revenge for the heavenly smelting divine craftsman and kill me? Are you sure you want to be enemies with the Jiang clan? Jiang Tianyi's expression and eyes were as dark as ice and sharp. A long time ago he had even promised Ji Tianxing that with the Jiang clan's power and foundation, Bai Feng would definitely give him face. He did not expect that after he revealed his identity, the White Phoenix Divine King still made a move to attack. Jiang Tianyi was under great pressure and could not move an inch. His body also became crooked. Bai Feng, you old bastard, the Jiang clan and you are irreconcilable. Jiang Tianyi had a bad premonition and even felt the aura of death descend. He roared furiously. However, he would not sit and wait for death. He ignored the tens of thousands of soldiers and the 2 divine kings and used all his strength to block Bai Feng. Boom. The next moment, the saber light slashed down and shattered Jiang Tianyi's divine light shield. Then the Tianyi divine bow in his hands was also sent flying by the saber light. He was about to be struck by the saber light again and be sent flying with heavy injuries. At this critical moment, a blinding white light suddenly appeared in front of Jiang Tianyi. It was a white light wall that was tens of thousands of feet tall and tens of thousands of feet wide. It was thick and sturdy. Boom. The saber light slashed the white light wall and exploded with an earth-shattering sound. Instantly, the saber light and the white light wall collapsed at the same time, exploding into billions of divine light shards that scattered in the night sky. Divine King White Phoenix's ultimate killing move was actually blocked. Jiang Tianyi was not injured. He was only pushed back tens of thousands of feet by the violent shockwave. This scene stunned him. Divine King Bai Feng, Qin Yi, Wuxia, and the tens of thousands of soldiers also revealed stunned looks. No one could have thought that there was actually someone even stronger who made a move at the critical moment and saved Jiang Tianyi. Everyone turned their heads to look at Tianyi Palace. Their gazes gathered on a white figure at the palace's entrance. Jiang Tianyi came back to his senses and also turned his head to look at the divine palace's entrance. When he saw that white-robed figure clearly, he immediately frowned, his expression becoming very complicated. Young Master Tianxing? Indeed, it was him who saved me. But why can he appear at this time? Bai Feng made such a big fuss in order to intercept and kill him. Doesn't his appearance confirm that Bai Feng's guess was correct? Although Jiang Tianyi was saved by Ji Tianxing, he felt grateful and rejoiced in his heart. But he was even more worried in his heart. Tonight was definitely a situation where one party would not rest until one party died. Lan Er and Yun Yao, on the other hand, held their divine weapons and chased after the defenders. How could the 20,000 defenders who had lost their will to fight withstand their slaughter? In less than a quarter of an hour, the 20,000 survivors were slaughtered by the 2 of them. The inside of Flowing Creek Pass became empty. High in the sky, Ji Tianxing and Divine King White Phoenix fought fiercely. Their figures flickered and teleported, releasing destructive divine arts. Shockwaves spread out like ripples, constantly crashing into Flowing River Pass. The pass, which had a radius of 5,000 miles, was quickly reduced to ruins. Although it was almost impossible for Ji Tianxing to defeat White Phoenix, he could temporarily stall White Phoenix so that she couldn't attack Jiang Tianyi and the others. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, and Yank teamed up to deal with Qin Yi, Wuxia, and the sky-smelting divine blacksmith. The sky-smelting divine blacksmith was already severely injured and he was attacked by Jiang Tianyi. He didn't even last 15 minutes before he was killed by Jiang Tianyi's divine bow. Not only was his divine body reduced to ashes, but his divine spark was also shattered. Qin Yi and Wu Shui were also in a miserable state. Their injuries kept worsening and they were covered in blood. 15 minutes later, both of them were severely injured and shot by Jiang Tianyi a few more times. Their divine bodies were destroyed on the spot. The couple only had their divine sparks left. They retreated in panic and fled to the edge of the battlefield. Jiang Tianyi locked onto their divine sparks and kept shooting arrows, chasing after them in Flowing River Pass. At this time, Chao Qingyu and Yank went to help Lan'er and Yun Yao deal with the 100,000 defenders around Flowing River Pass. They were scattered and there were a few hundred divine lords in the crowd, so it was difficult to deal with them. But Yank kept an eye on the emperor of Huasong country and charged forward recklessly. He was unstoppable. The emperor of Huasong country was already severely injured and couldn't resist at all. He could only dodge and escape. More than 100 imperial guards and divine lords of the Huasong country surrounded him to protect him. That was exactly what Yank wanted. Sword breaks 9 heavens, sword breaks 9 heavens. Chapter 3454. Yank was like a ferocious prehistoric beast. He was also like a killing machine that could destroy the heavens and earth. He caused a bloody storm in the battle formation. The 100-odd godly lords that were protecting Emperor Huasong were quickly killed by him. Even Emperor Huasong did not last long. He was killed by his fists and turned into ashes. Although Emperor Huasong was dead, the battle formation of the 100,000-strong army was not greatly affected. They were still guarding the bases of the various divine arrays and operating them with all their might to suppress Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Yank and the others. As the 6 god formations revolved at high speed, the terrifying god power sealed the Flowing River Pass and severely weakened Ji Tianxing and the others' combat power. Everyone's speed slowed down significantly. They could not circulate their divine power smoothly and their movements were extremely inconvenient. Their combat strength was constantly decreasing. Originally, Ji Tianxing could still fight Bai Feng to a draw. But now he was gradually at a disadvantage and was in a passive situation. Soon he was injured by Bai Feng. After all, Ji Tianxing was only at the 2nd level of the Divine King realm. He was 5 levels lower than Divine King Bai Feng. It was only temporary that he could fight Bai Feng to a draw. It was all because of his rich combat experience and various divine powers. Now the 6 divine arrays were operating at full power and were suppressing him. They had weakened his combat strength by at least 20 to 30%. Under such circumstances he was no match for Bai Feng. Not only was he forced to retreat, but he was also exhausted from defending. His injuries were also worsening. Seeing that he was in a passive situation, he was in a sorry state. Chao Qingyu, Yun Yao, Yank and the others all looked worried. Especially Yun Yao. She subconsciously wanted to help Ji Tianxing. However, Lan'er hurriedly pulled her back. Chao Qingyu and Yank also persuaded her. Miss Yun, the battle between young Master Tianxing and Divine King Bai Feng is not something we can interfere with. If we forcefully help, not only will we not be able to help him, we will also be in danger and distract him. Miss Yun, don't worry. Young Master Tianxing will not be defeated so quickly. He should be able to hold on for a long time. Young Master already had a plan. He would hold back Divine King White Phoenix while we deal with the guards and divine arrays as soon as possible. Only in this way can we kill our way out of Flowing River Pass as quickly as possible and escape from danger. If we go to help the Lord, even if we can gain the upper hand, we will still waste time. The longer we wait, the more dangerous our situation will be. Who knows if that old fellow White Phoenix found other divine kings to help or not. She swung the sun-moon swords with both hands as if she was holding the sun in her left hand and the moon in her right hand. The divine light of the sun-moon covered the sky. Swish, 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 swish. Thousands of sword auras of the sun-moon swords were 1,000 feet long and they landed lightly in the crowd. Following a series of loud rumbling noises, batch after batch of defenders were killed. Many defenders and high divine lords fought back with all their might and used all kinds of divine powers and techniques to drown her. But she swung her swords and formed a gold and silver net to protect herself. No matter how the defenders and high divine lords attacked, they couldn't hurt her at all. At first, Chao Qingyu, Yank and Lan'er were still paying attention to her, worried that her life was in danger and they were ready to save her at any time. But when they saw that she was so powerful and her fighting power was as strong as Lan'er's, they were relieved. Unknowingly, another 15 minutes had passed. More than half of the 100,000 defenders supporting the divine arrays were killed. Only 40,000 people were left. 70% of the hundreds of divine lords were also killed. Only 70 high divine lords were still stubbornly holding on. Of the 6 divine formations operating at full power, 3 had already been affected. Without the support of a large number of defenders, these 3 divine arrays were operating on their own and their power was greatly reduced. As a result, the pressure on Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Yun Yao and the others was reduced. It looked like the 40,000 defenders wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer and would be wiped out soon. Even though Bai Feng had the upper hand and suppressed Ji Tianxing, beating Ji Tianxing until he was covered in wounds, she was extremely anxious. Damn it! How could the strength of these few foreign race divine kings be so formidable? This can't continue. When they kill all the defenders and then join forces to attack me, I'll be in danger. Bai Feng had a premonition of danger, and she was also very angry. These foreign race godly kings actually have close ties with the Jiang clan. Not only did I offend the Jiang clan, but I also can't kill them. I've disappointed Divine Ambassador Xianxia. My forces have suffered heavy losses in this battle. Not only were 3 divine kings killed, but I also lost hundreds of elite experts and 200,000 elite soldiers. What a complete defeat. Sogu. Chapter 3455. In reality, Divine King White Phoenix had already lost. His 2 deputies Qin Yi and Wu Shui had both perished. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman was killed. Fire Mulberry Emperor was also dead. Over 200 high-level divine lords, over 300 ordinary divine lords, as well as hundreds of thousands of elite soldiers, all sacrificed. Even if he could capture Ji Tianxing and the rest, this price was also too tragic. In the following few hundred years, it would be difficult for Fire Mulberry region to recover its vitality. Furthermore, Divine King White Phoenix had offended the Jiang clan and would definitely suffer the Jiang clan's revenge. Furthermore, Divine King White Phoenix did not have the confidence or hope to capture Ji Tianxing and the rest. Not only could he not capture them, his life would also be in danger. If he still did not change his strategy, he would get closer and closer to death. This king is the dignified Fire Mulberry region lord, a high-level divine king, a descendant of the Phoenix clan's bloodline. How could I fall to such a state? For a full 3,000 years, this is the first time this king feels the danger of death. White Phoenix laughed bitterly and coldly in his heart. His eyes were as cold as ice as he stared at Ji Tianxing, firmly memorizing his appearance as well as divine soul aura. Boy, who exactly are you? How are you related to the Jiang clan? White Phoenix suppressed Ji Tianxing and chased after him in the night sky as he asked solemnly. Ji Tianxing responded calmly from beginning to end, resolving his attacks again and again. He said with a cold smile, "You want to know the answer? Then surrender without a fight. This king will naturally tell you." Dream on. Divine King White Phoenix frowned coldly and mocked contemptuously. "You are not worthy to be this king's opponent. You have already been severely injured by this king. What right do you have to make this king admit defeat and surrender? The one who should surrender is you. If you don't want to die under this king's blade, surrender obediently." Ji Tianxing continued to deal with him and said with a mocking sneer, "Stop putting on airs with this king. Who should surrender, you and I both know in our hearts. After my companions kill all the guards and shut down the 6 divine formations, it will be your time of death. White Phoenix, on account of your cultivation not being easy, this king will give you a chance to live. It's not too late to surrender now." Towards a high-level divine king like Bai Feng, Ji Tianxing was still somewhat moved. If he could subdue him and turn him into a puppet or bodyguard like Yank, his power would double. Furthermore, Bai Feng was backed by the Phoenix clan. Ji Tianxing was confident that he could infiltrate the Phoenix clan through Bai Feng in the future and take over the Phoenix clan. Now that he was already a divine king, he began to make preparations for his revenge. But when they saw that Fire Mulberry Emperor was dead, Qin Yi and Wu Shui were killed, and the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was also dead. Now even Domain Lord Bai Feng had escaped from the divine formations and stood in the sky above Flowing Creek Pass. They were truly a group of dragons without a leader and were in complete despair. "It's over. We've lost completely. 3 divine king powerhouses have been killed, and even His Excellency the Domain Lord has escaped from Flowing Creek Pass. We're dead for sure. We're all selling our lives for His Excellency the Domain Lord. How can he abandon us and flee alone? We were too stupid to be treated as cannon fodder by His Excellency the Domain Lord. All along, we thought that His Excellency the Domain Lord was unparalleled in the world, valiant and invincible. I didn't expect that when he really encountered a few foreign race divine kings, His Excellency the Domain Lord fled in defeat. What a joke. Countless soldiers and dozens of high-ranking divine lords all had heavy hearts and despair. their expressions sorrowful. Everyone understood that they had been abandoned by Bai Feng. Immediately, most of the soldiers and high-ranking divine lords lost their fighting spirit and no longer controlled the divine formations. Deafening discussions erupted in the crowd, roars of despair, unwillingness, and grief and indignation. Many high-ranking divine lords brought large batches of defending troops and retreated, fleeing out of Flowing Creek Pass. But they were blocked by layer after layer of divine formations, unable to escape at all. Finally, someone erupted in despair. A high-ranking divine lord looked up at the night sky and roared angrily at Bai Feng. "Domain Lord Bai Feng, all of us respect and worship you, that's why we bathed in blood and fought bravely for you, advancing dauntlessly wave after wave. But this is how you treat us. Aren't you afraid that this matter will spread out and make the Fire Mulberry region's billions of citizens bitterly disappointed? Furthermore, you abandoned us and allowed us to be slaughtered to the last. What benefits does it have to you? After we're all dead, what's the use of you being the only one left? Can you kill these few foreign race divine kings? I'm afraid that you'd still have to flee in defeat, right? Since that's the case, why can't you have some backbone and fight a bloody battle with everyone to the end?" This high-ranking divine lord shouted out the inner voice of several tens of thousands of defending troops. Countless people chimed in loudly, questioning why Divine King White Phoenix did this. Immediately, the entire Flowing Creek Pass seethed with excitement. Chapter 3456. The crowd was agitated. The 40,000 defending troops and dozens of high-ranking divine lords were not in the mood to fight. They joined forces to denounce Domain Lord White Phoenix. Speaking of which, it was also strange. If the leader of the soldiers was Emperor Huasong, perhaps they would not be so indignant. At least, Emperor Huasong would say some high-sounding words to boost morale and encourage the soldiers to continue holding on. But Domain Lord White Phoenix was good. He was always high and mighty, sacred and dignified. He did not even make a sound when he fled, afraid that the soldiers would find out and lose face as a domain lord. Most importantly, he was too high and mighty. It was basically the first time the 40,000 soldiers present saw him. Their reverence for him was very vague. Instead, their reverence for Emperor Huasong was very clear and deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. As such, when everyone was abandoned by White Phoenix and was about to face death, that was why they were so indignant and agitated. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the rest all revealed stunned looks. They looked at the defending troops that were collectively fleeing, then looked at White Phoenix in the night sky, revealing mocking smiles. "White Phoenix, oh White Phoenix, how did you become a domain lord? The people under your command all rebelled." A dignified domain lord, in order to drag out an ignoble existence, actually fled alone without a word. In order to stall for time, you actually sacrificed several tens of thousands of soldiers as cannon fodder. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi's cold laughter spread throughout the entire Flowing Chuan Pass. The 40,000 soldiers' emotions became even more agitated, shouting for White Phoenix to open the divine formation and let them out. Divine King White Phoenix was unable to restrain his anger. He was so angry that his face turned black. Surging killing intent flames surged out from his entire body. He glared at Ji Tianxing and the rest and shouted coldly, "Don't be smug. Even without those 40,000 soldiers, this king can also trap you all." Finished talking, he looked at the 40,000 soldiers inside Flowing Chuan Pass again and said in a dignified tone, "Soldiers, your bravery, fearlessness and loyalty, this king has seen it all. To be able to have such loyal and brave soldiers like you is this king's honor and pride." But everyone saw that the enemy's strength was too strong, and also too sinister and cunning. If this king fights a bloody battle with you to the end, not only will you die here, this king may also lose his life. But this king is shouldering the heavy responsibility entrusted to me by the divine envoy, and I cannot fail to live up to the trust of His Majesty the God Emperor. In order to complete the mission and seal the enemy here, this king can only do this. This prince believes that the soldiers are all people with a strong sense of righteousness. In order to protect the Fire Mulberry region, and for the glory of His Majesty the God Emperor, you will understand this king, right? Divine King White Phoenix's words immediately calmed the anger of many people. Many divine lords and soldiers revealed thoughtful expressions. Some of them even nodded in agreement. After all, Bai Feng had spoken the truth with a sincere tone. He was also very humble. This was a very smart move. If he still put on an arrogant attitude at this time, the 40,000 soldiers would definitely not work for him. However, just as the soldiers were wavering and hesitating, Zhang Tianyi said, "That's right. The divine King White Phoenix that all of you respect and worship only has this bit of strength. He misjudged our strength and rejoiced in grandiose achievements. That's why he set up an ambush at Flowing River Pass, hoping to catch all of us in one fell swoop. In the end, he caused the death of 3 divine kings under him, and even sent 160,000 soldiers to their deaths. But he doesn't care about the lives of ants like you. Anyway, there are tens of billions of people in the Fire Mulberry region, and the death of 100,000 is nothing. Furthermore, he is more afraid of death than any of you. After all, he is the region lord and has enjoyed all the glory and wealth. How can he die here with ants like you? It's fine if he escapes alone. He only needs to say a few words to obtain your forgiveness, and make you willingly send yourselves to your deaths. When all of you are dead, he will turn and run. Anyway, all of you won't be able to see." The rumbling voice spread throughout Flowing River Pass, allowing the 40,000 soldiers to hear it clearly. Immediately, many of the wavering and hesitant soldiers revealed indignant looks. Zhang Tianyi exposed White Phoenix's thoughts. Many of the soldiers and divine lords started to cause a ruckus again. White Phoenix was so angry that his eyes were about to split open. He wished that he could tear Zhang Tianyi into pieces. He cursed with a voice like muffled thunder, "Zhang Tianyi, you despicable and shameless bastard, don't slander me." "Ha ha." Zhang Tianyi looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. He asked back, "What? Your true colors were exposed by this king and you became angry from embarrassment? Do you think that your little bit of thoughts can be hidden from the 40,000 soldiers? Do you dare to swear to the heavens that you have never thought of this before?" This king. White Phoenix subconsciously wanted to raise his hand and swear. But his hand was raised halfway and he forcibly retracted it. What a joke. Swearing to the heavens, this sort of thing, it was best not to do it so easily. Otherwise the oath would really come true. Even if White Phoenix was a high divine king, he also had to maintain reverence towards the heavens. After all, the stronger one was, the more reverence one would have towards the heavenly Tao. Seeing White Phoenix stuck, Zhang Tianyi laughed coldly and mockingly. He pointed at him and shouted to the 40,000 soldiers, "Do you see that? White Phoenix is ashamed and does not dare to swear at all. You are all abandoned pawns, cannon fodder that is helping him to buy time." Bullsh**. White Phoenix was so angry that he cursed loudly. He did not care about his demeanor as a region leader at all. He roared angrily, "Zhang Tianyi, this king is going to turn you into ashes." As he roared, White Phoenix used his arts to control the 6 divine formations and released sharp blades of divine light that covered the sky. They swept towards Zhang Tianyi. Zhang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu and Yank were all affected, and they hurriedly used their arts to defend themselves. At this moment, Ji Tianxing, who had been silent all this time, suddenly smiled playfully. Lan and Yun Yao noticed his expression and were confused. They wanted to ask him what was wrong. However, before the two of them could speak, a deafening roar erupted from the 40,000 soldiers. At least 3,000 soldiers were agitated and cursed angrily. "White Phoenix, you are a region leader who is respected by millions of people, but you are a coward who is afraid of death. Your life is precious, but are our lives worthless? We have 200,000 soldiers working for you, but in your eyes, we are only worthy of being cannon fodder? Brothers, we can't be fooled by him anymore. He wants to live, but we don't want to die either. Everyone, let's work together to break these formations and escape from Flowing River Pass. What Bullsh**T mission? What loyalty? We just want to live." All sorts of curses and roars erupted from the crowd, echoing in the night sky. The 3,000 soldiers were scattered all over the crowd. As they roared and shouted, they waved their swords and sabers and attacked the divine formations in front of them. The other 30,000 soldiers were already hesitant and tormented in their hearts. Hearing the shouts and roars of the crowd, their emotions were immediately affected. Many people also broke the divine formations and tried to escape. The situation instantly became chaotic. Chapter 3457. In the blink of an eye, the 40,000 guards were in chaos. At least half of the guards were incited, shouting things like, "I want to live," and attacking the divine formation with all their might. The other 20,000 guards and dozens of high-level divine lords watched the chaos unfold with their own eyes, but they were full of hesitation. Many people did not stop their companions, but they also did not dare to participate easily. But even more people, incited and led by their companions, also joined the ranks of those attacking the divine formation. Seeing this scene, Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, Yang Yunyao and Lan Er were all stunned. Everyone's expressions were strange and they exclaimed in astonishment, "What's going on? Why are these guards acting like they're on steroids?" Bai Feng, who was above Flowing River Pass, was also filled with astonishment, so angry that his entire body trembled. "Bastards! You damned bastards, how can you do something like betray me at the last minute? You don't deserve to be Fire Mulberry Region's citizens. I'm ashamed of you." Bai Feng never thought that it would be fine if the guards did not help to defend the divine formation, but they actually turned around and attacked the divine formation he had set up. This was simply too ridiculous. However, no matter how much he roared and shouted, it was of no use. The guards who had fallen into madness did not listen to his orders at all. Furthermore, Bai Feng would not be able to kill those defenders. Not only could he not intimidate the guards, but he would also completely enrage them, causing all the guards to rise up and resist. For a moment, Bai Feng was in a dilemma and was also at his wits' end. The only thing he could do was desperately maintain the divine formation's operation and block the guards' attacks. Inside Flowing River Pass, Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, and the others gradually came to their senses and sensed that something was wrong. Everyone looked at Ji Tianxing, revealing inquiring gazes. "Young Master Tianxing, this should have something to do with you, right? No matter how cowardly those guards are, they shouldn't be so agitated. Young Master, did you do something? Although I also think that Young Master did it, those people still look quite normal. Young Master can't possibly turn them into puppets in such a short period of time, right?" Faced with everyone's questions, Ji Tianxing simply nodded with a smile and admitted it. "That's right, I did it." Everyone exclaimed in shock and disbelief. "Oh my God. Sure enough, it was Young Master's doing. Young Master, how did you do that?" The way I see it, the 3,000 plus defenders were the first to change sides before the others were influenced and incited. "Young Master, did you do something to those 3,000 people?" Chapter 3458. Just like that, the innermost ring's first mediocre king-level divine array was destroyed. Around the hole, which had a radius of 1,000 feet, were densely packed cracks. Cracking sounds could be heard. The appearance of this hole gave the 40,000 soldiers hope of escaping. Without needing anyone to give the order, dozens of Sir Gods and 40,000 soldiers attacked at the same time. They unleashed their most violent divine skills and blasted them toward the hole. They had no choice. It was just a hole. It was not enough to destroy the entire divine array. If all 40,000 soldiers were to rush over at once, Bai Feng would fill in the hole before they could even escape from the divine array. Therefore the soldiers cooperated and attacked together. They wanted to expand the hole further. Boom. Crack. In the next instant, an overwhelming number of attacks converged into a 5-colored torrent that slammed into the hole viciously. As expected, with a deafening explosion, the hole instantly expanded by 10 times. It became a gap with a radius of 1,000 feet. The cracks around the gap also became denser and spread faster. Kacha. The cracks spread rapidly and soon collapsed. The gap also expanded again. It extended to a radius of 100,000 feet. This time the damage to the divine array was too great. Even if Bai Feng tried her best to repair it, it would not be repaired in a short time. "This is great. The divine array is destroyed. We can finally escape. What are you waiting for? Run." Territorial Lord Bai Feng wanted to trap us here as cannon fodder, but the enemy helped us break the divine array. How ironic. What territorial lord? What enemy? They are just divine kings who do not care about the lives of others for their own benefit. They are not good people. Don't waste time. If we don't escape, the territorial lord will repair the divine array. The 40,000 soldiers and dozens of Sir Gods cheered excitedly. They surged toward the gap like a tide. Zoosh. In a short time, more than 40,000 people passed through the gap and escaped the first divine array. However, what blocked them was the second divine array. The 5-colored light screen that covered the sky was only a few dozen miles away. The 40,000 soldiers immediately calmed down. They regained their despair and helplessness. Even though Ji Tianxing and the others had broken the first divine formation and helped them escape, they were still unable to escape. However, there were still a second, third, and fourth divine formations in front of them. A total of 5 divine formations. Don't be discouraged, everyone. Let's work together and aim at the same point. If we attack together, we might be able to break the formation. At this critical moment, a relatively clear-headed High God Lord loudly suggested. This suggestion received everyone's approval. Under the lead of that divine monarch, everyone simultaneously cast spells to attack a certain spot on the multicolored light barrier. However, they didn't understand king-grade divine formations at all. They just randomly found a target and attacked it. Naturally, it was useless. The torrent of divine light that filled the sky had collapsed, but the 5-colored light barrier was still intact. Fortunately, at this moment, Ji Tianxing had already used his God's Eye secret technique to observe for 30 breaths of time. He found another weak point in the 5-colored light shield. Look carefully. Attack this place with me. Ji Tianxing shouted in a low voice. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed out a sword light with all his strength. Swish. The 1,000-foot sacred sword slashed at a certain spot on the 5-colored light barrier with an earth-shattering power. Chao Qingyu, Yang Yunyao and the others had already been waiting for Ji Tianxing to attack. Seeing him slash out a sword light, everyone also waved their weapons and attacked the weak point of the divine formation with all their might. Zhang Tianyi was no exception. He pulled his divine bow and shot out the most powerful meteor arrows. Of course, he was even more shocked and his face was full of disbelief. Oh God! Grandpa isn't just a top divine blacksmith, he's also a top array master. He was only able to find the weak point of the first divine formation because he had observed it in advance. However, he only observed the second divine formation for 30 breaths and found the weak point. This is terrifying. Just as Zhang Tianyi's heart was filled with shock, an earth-shattering explosion erupted. Boom! A 1,000-foot hole appeared on the second 5-colored light barrier and countless divine light shards splashed out. The 40,000 soldiers and dozens of divine lords had attacked twice before, but to no avail. When they saw that Ji Tianxing and the others had joined forces to attack and break the second divine formation, they instantly cheered excitedly. They had a tacit understanding and immediately unleashed their divine abilities with all their might. They unleashed a torrent of divine light that blotted out the sky and blasted towards the hole in the light barrier. Boom! Another earth-shattering explosion erupted, resounding through the clouds. Without a doubt, the divine formation, which was already broken, instantly expanded to a radius of 10,000 feet. Countless cracks also appeared on it. The 40,000 soldiers and the many high divine lords hurriedly passed through the massive gap and escaped from the second divine formation. Then they learned their lesson. They stopped attacking the divine formation together and waited patiently for Ji Tianxing and the others to destroy the divine formation so that they could finish the job. Chapter 3459. Boom. Crack. Following an earth-shattering explosion, the third divine formation was destroyed by Ji Tianxing's group and the 40,000 defenders. However, the 40,000 defenders charged through the gap without any regard for their own safety, only to be met with an incomparably tragic massacre. Bai Feng, who was furious to the point of going berserk, controlled the fourth divine formation and released the most violent killing move. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Hundreds of millions of saber lights, sword lights, and spear shadows flew out from the 5-colored light barrier, as well as towering divine flames, ice blades and frost swords. All kinds of divine technique attacks poured down like a torrential flood, drowning the 40,000 defenders. Ah! Bam! 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 Kacha kacha! Heart-wrenching screams, anguished roars and the muffled sounds of divine techniques colliding erupted one after another. The entire flowing river pass was in chaos, completely becoming a world of divine light torrents. How could those 40,000 celestial gods possibly withstand the onslaught of a king-grade divine formation? In less than 10 breaths of time, 80% of the soldiers were slaughtered. All of them were torn to shreds by the divine light and turned to ashes. The few thousand defenders who were lucky enough to survive, as well as the dozens of high-ranked divine lords, also suffered considerable injuries, their bodies bathed in blood. They struggled desperately, frantically fleeing, but could not escape the fate of certain death no matter what. In extreme despair, Thousands of people looked up at the sky and started to curse and roar at Baifeng. Baifeng, you will die a horrible death. We are your people, loyal and devoted to you, but I didn't expect that we would be killed by you. You evil demon who disregards human life. You are worse than pigs and dogs. You are not worthy of being the region lord, and you are even less worthy of being revered by billions of people. Even if we are all killed by you and turned to ashes, your vicious and despicable deeds will still be carried out. Eventually, the entire Fire Mulberry region will be known by your despicable and vicious ways. Baifeng, even if we go to the netherworld and become ghosts, we will never let you off. I curse you. I curse you to be torn apart by lightning, burned to ashes, and never to be reincarnated. Countless heart-wrenching, furious, hopeless and helpless cries sounded within Flowing River Pass. Baifeng became even more enraged. Her eyes were as red as blood and flames danced around her body. He pursed his lips and didn't say a word. He worked even harder to control the god formation to speed up the slaughter of the several thousand defenders. As for Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi and the others, as they circulated their energy to block the divine light that filled the sky, they did not forget to observe the weakness of the fourth divine formation. Even if I still have 6 divine arrays as my trump cards, it will not be able to withstand him breaking them. I cannot let him continue breaking the arrays. I have to think of a way to stop him. Baifeng was anxious, but she could maintain her calm and composure. He used all his strength to cast the art and controlled the 5th divine array. It revolved rapidly and frenziedly attacked Ji Tianxing and the others. Hundreds of millions of divine light blades poured down like a torrential rain, drowning everyone's figures. All kinds of sword gleams and divine light shadows formed a torrent of torrents and hurricanes as they violently attacked. Yun Yao and Lan Er's situation instantly became precarious. Even Chao Qingyu and Yang could only defend with all their might. They did not dare to be careless. Only Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi could deal with it easily and were not injured. However, Ji Tianxing was worried about Yun Yao's safety. He could only protect her with all his strength and help her block the attacks of the divine arrays. Jiang Tianyi could only disperse some of his strength to help Lan Er block the attacks. In this way, everyone was safe and could hold on for a long time. However, Ji Tianxing could not observe the divine arrays seriously. It was difficult to find the weak points of the divine arrays. When Baifeng saw that his actions were effective, he used all his strength to activate the divine arrays and released his strongest killing move. Instantly, Ji Tianxing and the others were in an even more dangerous situation. The pressure also increased. Baifeng realized that Ji Tianxing was especially concerned about Yun Yao and was doing his best to protect her. Thus, Baifeng changed his attack strategy slightly and focused on attacking Yun Yao. He looked like he was going to tear her into pieces. Yun Yao was surrounded by danger and could die at any time. Ji Tianxing was also under a lot of pressure. He did not have the time to search for the divine array's weak points. Baifeng had achieved his goal. He was secretly delighted and couldn't help but sneer. Those 40,000 traitors are indeed my stumbling blocks. Without them causing trouble, I can actually trap these people. According to the current situation, I can last for at least half a month. I hope there won't be any more changes. Within half a month, Xianxia and the other zone lords will definitely arrive. Previously, Baifeng was still very desperate and helpless. Now he saw hope of success again. He was very confident and expectant. However, Baifeng could not be happy for long. After a short 100 breaths of time, the situation on the battlefield changed. Chapter 3460. Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu and the others could not even take care of themselves. Yun Yao could not protect herself. She had to rely on Ji Tianxing to protect her. She also knew that Ji Tianxing had no time to find the weakness of the divine array in order to protect her. If this continued, it would only drag on endlessly. This was very disadvantageous to them. Therefore, she took the initiative to suggest to Ji Tianxing, "Tianxing, don't worry about me. I will return to the divine pagoda to recuperate now. If you can't break the divine array, we will all be trapped here." Ji Tianxing and she had a telepathic connection. The two of them did not need to say much about the reasons and the stakes. They both knew very well. Therefore, Ji Tianxing did not hesitate or dissuade her. He readily nodded and agreed. Zoosh. With a flash of divine light, Yun Yao entered the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and returned to the distorted spacetime. He was out of danger. Ji Tianxing also heaved a sigh of relief. The pressure on him was greatly reduced. He continued to cast spells to block the divine array's attack. He also took the opportunity to use his God's Eye mystic technique to observe the fifth divine array. Although this divine array was operating at an extremely fast speed, Bai Feng was also constantly adjusting it and using all kinds of methods to cover up the divine array's weakness. However, Ji Tianxing's array formation skills and experience far exceeded Bai Feng's imagination. No matter how intricate and complicated the divine array was, it would become clear in his eyes. He quickly analyzed the veins and nodes of the divine formation by following the vines to get to the melon, extracting the silk from the cocoon. Then he selected the weakest and most vulnerable points from the tens of millions of nodes of the array. This process sounded simple, but it actually required a lot of deduction and calculation. Only a monster like Ji Tianxing would be able to analyze the results in such a short period of time, and with such accuracy. Time passed quickly. Soon 15 minutes passed. Finally, Ji Tianxing found a weak point in the 5-colored light screen that covered the sky and the sun. Found it. Everyone attack with me. Ji Tianxing was energized and shouted in a sonorous voice. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and unleashed 100% of his power. He stabbed out a dazzling giant sword. Shwa! The gigantic sword broke through all the blade lights and sword shadows in the sky and crashed into the 5-colored light screen with a deafening boom. However, everyone was exhausted from resisting the divine formation's attacks. It was very difficult for them to attack together with him. Only Jiang Tianyi, who was relatively strong, was able to draw his bow and shoot 3 shooting star arrows at that weak spot. Unfortunately, his and Ji Tianxing's attacks were unable to break through the light curtain, leaving only a crack. Ji Tianxing was not discouraged. With a determined look on his face, he shouted, "Again! Jiang Tianyi, let's attack at the same time." Jiang Tianyi naturally obeyed. When he slashed out with his full strength, he drew his bow and shot out 4 meteor arrows without any regard for his own safety. That giant sword shone with golden light and contained an extremely powerful and mysterious power. This was a completely new kind of power that Jiang Tianyi had never come into contact with before. He felt that it was extremely powerful and unfamiliar. This was because Ji Tianxing had used the power of the 5 elements to execute the world slash. Kaboom! Amidst a loud boom, the world slash and the meteor arrows hit the 5-colored light screen at the same time. The light screen, which was as thick as a wall, was instantly blasted a few 100 feet wide hole in it. Thousands of pieces flew everywhere. After the successful attack, Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi hurriedly covered everyone, passing through the sky full of saber lights and sword shadows, rushing out of the gap. Shwa! In the blink of an eye, everyone had escaped from the 5th divine formation and arrived at the edge of the flowing river pass. There was only one light screen left in front of them. Jiang Tianyi was excited. He said happily, "There is only one divine formation left. Let's work together to break this divine formation. Then we can surround Bai Feng and kill that old bastard." Chao Qingyu, Yang and Lan Er were filled with relief and anticipation. They were clearly much more relaxed. However, Ji Tianxing was still expressionless. He frowned and observed the divine formation's light screen. His eyes were focused and cautious. At the same time, Bai Feng gave up on the 5th divine formation and controlled the 6th divine formation to attack again. The divine formation's light screen, which was thousands of miles wide, released all kinds of divine abilities and killer moves toward Ji Tianxing and the others. As he controlled the divine formation to attack, he thought to himself that method just now worked. His speed of breaking the divine formation slowed down significantly. It even took him close to 15 minutes. However, if this continues, even if I still have 6 divine formations as my trump card, I can only delay them for 2 hours. The power of one divine formation is not enough. I have to activate the other divine formations in advance. After making up his mind, Bai Feng used one hand to control the 6th divine formation. His other hand used a divine ability to activate the 3 hidden divine formations. Shwa, shwa. A moment later, 3 more light screens lit up in the night sky outside the flowing river pass. One light screen was formed by divine lightning. It flashed with billions of lightning arcs and looked very violent. "I can't back down and let you and the Lord fight alone." Jiang Tianyi looked at him in surprise and gave him a thumbs up when he heard his deep but determined voice. Soon half an hour passed. Ji Tianxing was quite injured and had used up a lot of his divine power. His observation of the divine formations had slowed down. In addition, this lightning divine formation was obviously more complicated than the previous 6 divine formations. Therefore, Ji Tianxing spent twice as much time to find the weak point of the divine formation. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. He joined forces with Jiang Tianyi to attack the weak point of the divine formation. If they couldn't break it the first time, they attacked a second time, a third time, a fourth time. Finally, after 7 consecutive attacks, the 2 of them broke the 7th divine formation. The 3 of them passed through the 100-foot wide gap and escaped the seal of the divine formation. They continued to attack the 8th divine formation. Compared to the previous divine formation, this one was more complicated and more complete. Ji Tianxing used the same trick again and had to spend more time to find the weak point of this divine formation. Just like that, time continued to pass. Another hour later, the 3 of them broke through the 8th divine formation and continued to face the 9th divine formation. Ji Tianxing's speed of breaking the divine formation was getting slower and slower. However, compared to all the god kings, this was still a heaven-defying speed. Bai Feng's expression darkened. His heart clenched and he was extremely anxious. In order to slow down Ji Tianxing's speed, he had to activate the last 3 divine formations in advance. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Another 3 screens of light lit up, covering a radius of more than 10,000 miles. As Bai Feng controlled the divine array to unleash devastating attacks, she thought to herself, it's no wonder that Celestial Aspect Emissary was defeated by him. This brat is truly a monstrous genius. This king is really unlucky. Why did I meet such a perverted guy? I've used up all my trump cards. In 4 hours at most, this king will have to run for his life. Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 3462. However, Bai Feng had already predicted the outcome. No one in the entire Fire Mulberry region could help him. Only Stellar Aspect Ambassador and the other region lords were qualified to help and save him. But those Divine King powerhouses needed around 8 days at the fastest before they could reach the Flowing Creek Pass. No matter what, Bai Feng would not be able to hold on until then. Stellar Aspect Ambassador, I have already tried my best. Bai Feng looked up at the night sky in the north and sighed silently in his heart. Soon another 2 hours passed. Ji Tianxing had also broken through the 9th divine array, creating a 1,000-foot wide gap. Ji Tianxing led Jiang Tianyi and Yank through the gap and continued to attack the 10th divine array. The last 3 divine arrays were each more complicated than the last, and their defensive power was also stronger. Ji Tianxing and the other 2's power continued to weaken, causing the time needed to break through the divine arrays to become longer and longer. In the process of breaking through the divine arrays, Ji Tianxing had considered using the spatial transference divine ability to teleport thousands of miles away. That way he would not need to break through the divine arrays to escape the seals of the dozen or so divine arrays. However, this idea was not realistic. The 12 king-grade divine arrays that Bai Feng had set up all had the ability to seal space. Therefore, Ji Tianxing could only proceed step by step and break the divine formations one by one. Time passed very slowly. To Bai Feng, every minute and every second was especially torturous. 3 hours later, the 10th divine array was broken through, and the pressure on Ji Tianxing and the other 2 was greatly reduced. 6 hours later, the 11th divine array was broken through as well. There was only 1 divine array left in front of Ji Tianxing and the other 2. The pressure on them decreased once again and their expressions were clearly much more relaxed. However, Bai Feng's expression was as cold as ice, and his eyes were filled with disappointment and unwillingness. In the end, we have failed miserably and are powerless to reverse the situation. He sighed in his heart as he tried his best to control the divine array to kill Ji Tianxing and the other 2. However, defeat was inevitable. No matter how hard he tried, he could not change the outcome. 2 hours later, this divine array was also cracked by Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi. Even though both of them were panting from exhaustion, their divine powers were weak, and their auras were unstable and chaotic. However, if they attacked 100 more times, they would be able to break through the 5-colored light screen and rush out of this divine formation. At this moment, Bai Feng had completely given up all hope. He stopped controlling the divine formation and gave up on struggling. He said to Ji Tianxing, Tianxing, I have to admit that I have underestimated you. With your talent, strength, and methods, You'll definitely be unrivaled in the world in the future and become a well-known figure among divine kings. But in the end you are only a god king. You will never be able to escape the rule of His Majesty the God Emperor. As early as 1,000 years ago the world had already changed. In the present boundless heaven continent the God Emperor reigned supreme. No one could go against his will. The power of the God Emperor realm is not something you can imagine. Even if you can kill this king Oracle Xianxia and even more domain lords and divine envoys. But so what? In the end you will die under the siege of so many god kings. In fact, His Majesty the God Emperor only needs one palm to easily crush all of you. At this moment Bai Feng's anger had already subsided. His emotions were calm and steady. The words he said were also sincere and came from the bottom of his heart. Among them there was a faint trace of helplessness. After pausing for a moment he continued, 8,000 years ago, it was indeed the various great paradises that controlled the continent and looked down on the common people. But that is already history. Whether it is you or me, we can no longer immerse ourselves in the glory of the past. The world has already changed. If you want to live on peacefully, you can only give up on unrealistic delusions. This king has said all that I have to say. Take care of yourselves. With that, Divine King Bai Feng sighed and turned to fly away. Zhoosh! He transformed into a scarlet flame and rapidly disappeared into the horizon, escaping without a trace. Inside the divine formation, Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi were still attacking the divine formation together. Yang ignored his miserable injuries and pointed in the direction that Bai Feng escaped. He cursed angrily, "That old bastard, how could he be so cowardly?" When he saw that we were about to break through the last formation, he knew that his life was in danger and actually fled in advance. Jiang Tianyi said in a neutral tone, "Actually, we are all heavily injured and weak. If Bai Feng fought a bloody battle with us he might not lose. But he was too cautious and would rather give up a little hope than take the risk." Ji Tianxing recalled Bai Feng's words and revealed a thoughtful expression. He said, "An old and cunning fellow like him naturally has his own way of survival. Being greedy and advancing rashly is not a good thing. Only by being cautious can one live long. Moreover, Bai Feng has no enmity with us. He was just following orders. He has already sacrificed 3 god kings, hundreds of elites and an army of 200,000. There is no need for him to throw himself in as well." Jiang Tianyi and Yank nodded in agreement. After a moment of silence, Yank asked, "Master, what did he mean by those words he said before he fled?" Ji Tianxing frowned. The great battle at Flowing River Pass previously enriched her actual combat experience and also let her see the disparity between herself and Divine King powerhouses. She worked even harder in her cultivation and improved her strength bit by bit. Unfortunately, after careful observation, Ji Tianxing discovered that she basically showed no signs of breaking through to the Divine King realm. It seemed like he could only place his hopes on the 7th Divine Pearl. On the other hand, Ji Ke's situation was a little out of Ji Tianxing's expectations. The time she broke through to the 9th level Divine Lord realm was a little later than Yunyao. However, she had already reached peak Divine Lord realm and was beginning to break through to the Divine King realm. Although it was difficult to break through to the Divine King realm, it was like crossing a natural chasm. But she had already started to try, and she summarized her experience from her failures, continuously strengthening her foundation. Ji Tianxing could tell that her foundation was already very robust, and she had very high hopes of breaking through to the Divine King realm. At most 1 to 200 years, at least 3 to 5 years, she should be able to succeed. Apart from that, White Dragon, Ji Wushuang, Zhen Hong, Black Dragon, and Qin Yu were all high-ranked divine lords. Everyone was cultivating bitterly with all their might, looking like they would not give up until they broke through to the Divine King realm. But Ji Tianxing was clear in his heart that not all hard work could be exchanged for rewards. Not everyone would definitely break through to the Divine King realm if they followed him. Some results were actually predestined long ago. Of course, if a massive fortuitous opportunity appeared, perhaps the outcome would change. Ji Tianxing circled around the sacred tree and prepared to leave the distorted spacetime to check on Jiang Tianyi's situation. But right at this time, the Burial of Heaven's voice sounded out in his mind. "I have 2 pieces of good news, do you want to hear it?" Ever since the Burial of Heaven became a mid-rank king-grade divine artifact, it had not spoken again. This was the first time it had taken the initiative to contact Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianqing was stunned and hurriedly asked, "What good news?" "Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes has become a god." The Burial of Heaven's tone was calm and emotionless. Ji Tianqing frowned and was a little dazed. "Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes? Which Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes?" The Burial of Heaven was probably a little speechless. After a moment of silence, it explained, "It's the old man you subdued in the profound sky continent. Later you refined him into an ancient tree and he has been in the sword world ever since." "So it's him." Ji Tianqing was enlightened and recalled. He chuckled and said, "It's been too long, I've forgotten about him." The Burial of Heaven continued to explain, "All these years, it has been rooted in the sword world, desperately absorbing heaven and earth spirit chi and resources, steadily increasing its strength. Originally, it was limited by the body of an ancient tree and could not become a god. But not long ago I recovered to mid-rank king grade, and the sword world also expanded 100 times. The world changed greatly, divine power was abundant, and resources increased dramatically. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was the first to break through the shackles and become a true god." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a chuckle, "Interesting. This old man is tenacious. Even after becoming an ancient tree, he refused to give up hope of becoming a god. Now that he has become a true god, he can break free from the shackles and take human form again, moving freely." He thought for a moment and said, "How about this? Throw Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes into the 5 Elements world and let him protect my father and guide his cultivation." The Burial of Heaven said calmly, "He is indeed a suitable candidate. The 5 Elements world has transformed and its shackles have been released. Billions of living beings have the hope of becoming a god. Your father's aptitude is not too high and he is still in the tribulation realm. With the protection and guidance of Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes, he will definitely be able to safely pass the 9 tribulations and become a martial saint." Ji Tianqing said with a smile, "I have refined the 5 Elements world and placed it in the heaven-mending pearl. Even if those living beings become gods, they will not be able to ascend to the god realm." The Burial of Heaven agreed, "This is also the reason why Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes is so anxious. That is why I am informing you. Of course, the 5 Elements world is not weaker than the god realm, so there is no need to ascend." Ji Tianqing stopped discussing this matter and asked, "What is the second good news?" The Burial of Heaven said calmly, "The Gold Mountain King has also become a god." "The Gold Mountain King?" Ji Tianqing was startled. With his previous experience, he thought for a moment and guessed the answer. "The leader of the Earth Spirit clan in the Sword World, right?" "Yes." The Burial of Heaven replied and added, "The Earth Spirit clan has already multiplied to 100,000 people, and there is no lack of martial gods and martial saints among them." Ji Tianqing was quite surprised and found it hard to believe. "Those dwarves are quite fertile, huh? I haven't paid attention to them for many years and they have actually grown to this extent? It seems that the Earth Spirit clan is worth nurturing and they will be useful in the future." "Understood." The Burial of Heaven replied and fell into a long silence, no longer speaking. "Especially stellar aspect emissary, he will definitely gather many domain lords and deity kings to kill me. It was just that the news of the defeat at Flowing River Pass had just spread out. They definitely had to act cautiously. In fact, they might even reformulate their plans and not be in a hurry to act. But the next time they make a move, it will definitely be a thunderous strike." "That makes sense." Jiang Tianyi nodded in agreement and said in a low voice, 10 days ago, I sent a message to the Divine Attraction Paradise and asked the Jiang clan's spies to help me gather information. At the same time, I also sent a message to a friend in Shemi Paradise, asking her to help me investigate the situation in the surrounding regions. I reckon it won't be long before they get back to me." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Shemi Paradise is best at gathering information and has eyes and ears all over the world. But the people of Shemi Paradise don't care about family and only care about money and benefits. You actually have friends?" Jiang Tianyi was stunned for a moment. For some reason his face turned red and his gaze was a little evasive. Looking at his posture, Ji Tianqing vaguely understood something. Jiang Tianyi was a little embarrassed and hurriedly changed the topic, asking, "Young Master Tianqing, may I ask, how did you become enemies with Stellar Aspect Emissary?" Ji Tianqing replied casually, "At the beginning, I only became enemies with 2 domain lords. Those 2 domain lords suffered losses and went to Stellar Aspect Emissary for support. In the end, I killed one of the 2 domain lords and the other went missing. Stellar Aspect Emissary was also heavily injured by me. From then on, Stellar Aspect Emissary gathered many deity kings and domain lords to besiege me. I see. Zhang Tianyi nodded and said with some indignation, those divine emissaries are very arrogant and domineering. They consider themselves the guards of the God Emperor and don't put anyone in their eyes. In the past, there were a few divine emissaries who went to Divine Attraction Paradise and all of them were very arrogant and arrogant. Anyone who offended them would be charged with the crime of disobeying the God Emperor and rebelling against the God Emperor. But in reality, many divine emissaries are even inferior to those domain lords. In the eyes of us ancient clan disciples, those divine emissaries are the lackeys of the God Emperor, and the most arrogant and despicable ones. Seeing Zhang Tianyi's reaction, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but ask, you must know that I killed a domain lord and offended a divine emissary. Aren't you worried? Worried about what? Zhang Tianyi asked subconsciously. Ji Tianxing said, about getting into trouble. Teach. Zhang Tianyi didn't think much of it and said with a smile, what's there to be afraid of? Moreover, not only were there more than 10 area masters rushing over, it seemed like there were 2 divine envoys as well. They might meet up in the Red Dragon domain and give us a thunderous blow. Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. He smiled and said, their target is not us but me. Zhang Tianyi was very smart and understood what he meant. He hurriedly said, young Master Tianxing, you are looking down on me. I'm not afraid of those divine envoys and region lords. I won't back down. I want to fight alongside you and bring you back to the Divine Attraction Paradise. Ji Tianxing smiled again and said, you must know that you represent the Jiang clan of the Divine Attraction Paradise. You can't just say what you want. Moreover, your 9th brother is being bullied in the Hengshan region. You should go there to help him. Zhang Tianyi said firmly, young Master Tianxing, you are the benefactor of the Jiang clan. Now that you are in trouble, how can we just sit by and do nothing? As for going to the Hengshan region to help my 9th brother, I think it's a good idea. Let's go together. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Divine Envoy Xianxia must have gathered more than 10 area masters in the Red Dragon domain. He must have set up a trap. Since that's the case, there's no need for us to fight him head-on. Let's take a detour to the Hengshan region. If they continued to fly south, they would pass through the entire Red Dragon domain. It would take at least half a month. However, the Hengshan region was southwest of the Red Dragon domain. They could avoid Divine Envoy Xianxia's ambush by taking a detour. Originally, Zhang Tianyi didn't want to go to the Hengshan region to help Zhang Tianxing. Now that he knew about Divine Envoy Xianxia's scheme and Ji Tianxing's agreement, he changed direction and flew to the Hengshan region. 10 days later. Heaven Dragon Pass in the southern part of the Red Dragon domain. It was located at the southern border of the Red Dragon domain. 100,000 miles south would be out of the Red Dragon domain. Heaven Dragon Pass was located in a towering mountain range. The mountains were steep and the cliffs were tens of thousands of feet high. Compared to the Manchuan Pass in the Fire Mulberry domain, this pass was smaller but the terrain was more dangerous. Originally, this was the border between the 2 domains. It was an important pass and a place to fight for. However, the boundless Heaven continent had been peaceful for thousands of years. There were no wars between the domains. Normally, there were only 100,000 soldiers stationed at Heaven Dragon Pass. Moreover, the 100,000 soldiers were relatively free. They spent their days patrolling and cultivating. Until 10 days ago, the peace of Heaven Dragon Pass was broken. First, the area master of the Red Dragon domain led several emperors and more than 200 Surgot experts to Heaven Dragon Pass. The 100,000 soldiers were ready for battle. They were ready to listen to the orders of the area master and the emperors. Then, the area master of the Red Dragon domain and his deputy worked together to set up a divine array. The emperors, more than 200 Surgot experts and the 100,000 soldiers helped. In 10 days they set up 3 king-level divine arrays. Heaven Dragon Pass became impregnable. It was surrounded by divine arrays. Its lethality was terrifying. During this time, the area masters of other domains led a large number of Surgot experts and arrived at Heaven Dragon Pass. These area masters and Sir God experts did not rest after arriving at Heaven Dragon Pass. They also joined the ranks of setting up divine arrays. The entire Heaven Dragon Pass was filled with a tense and austere atmosphere. Everyone knew that an earth-shattering battle was about to arrive very soon. Just like the Manchuan Pass in the Fire Mulberry Domain. Until today, there were 17 area masters and more than 20 Sir God experts gathered in Heaven Dragon Pass. Tonight, a few more super noble God Kings arrived at the Heaven Dragon Mountain Pass mysteriously and silently. The 100,000 soldiers were not qualified to know their identities. However, the 20 Sir God experts gathered in the Commander-in-Chief's palace saw their true faces. There were 4 of them. 3 of them were honorable divine envoys. Divine Envoy Xianxia was the leader. Divine Envoy Ku Yun and Divine Envoy Zhang Ying assisted. As for the 4th Sir God, it was the area master of the neighboring Fire Mulberry Domain, Sir God King Bai Feng. All the Sir God experts present had heard of the battle at Manchuan Pass and Sir God King Bai Feng's encounter. Everyone looked at Bai Feng with eyes full of sympathy. Bai Feng did not say anything. She stood silently among the many Sir God experts. She was not conspicuous. Divine Envoy Xianxia's injuries had not healed. However, it did not seem to affect him on the surface. His face was gloomy. His eyes were sharp. His entire body was filled with killing intent. His gaze swept across the many Sir God experts in the hall. He said in a deep voice, "The traitors led by Tianxing went all the way south and killed several area masters and Sir God experts. This is the first time such a thing has happened in 1,000 years. It is simply appalling. It is so cruel that it makes one's hair stand on end. I do not wish to speak any more nonsense. In short, we have gathered a large number of troops this time. 30 Sir God experts are overseeing. We must kill them at Heaven Dragon Pass. If we let them escape, everyone here will take their own lives to atone for their sins. Including me." Chapter 3468. This was the decision made by the 3 divine messengers after a discussion. The 20 or so God Kings present had no right to question him. They could only obey. Moreover, Bai Feng spoke with certainty. The many God Kings found it hard to refute. Since the 3 divine envoys believed that it was true, then he would take it as true for the time being. Soon the 3 groups of people were selected and prepared. Of the 15 God Kings, 6 of them were domain lords. All of them were left in the Heaven Dragon Pass, waiting for the next target. This was also in case Bai Feng's calculation was wrong. If Ji Tianxing and the others entered the Tianlong Pass, they would at least have enough power to eliminate them. The other 11 God Kings were led by a higher God King as they drove their divine ships towards the Hengshan Empire. As for the 3 divine envoys and Bai Feng, they took the lead and left Tianlong Pass on a top king-grade divine artifact. That divine artifact was called the Void-Piercing Hairpin. It was said that it was a relic left behind by the mother of the Shadow Executioner divine envoy. It wasn't an offensive or defensive divine artifact. Instead, it was a flying divine artifact that could travel through space and travel through outer space. In the boundless universe, the sky-piercing hairpin could travel thousands of miles in an instant. Flying in the divine realm, one's speed would increase by several folds. Ordinary God Kings would need half a month to reach Hengshan region's Hengshan Empire. As for the 3 divine envoys and Bai Feng, relying on the power of the space-piercing hairpin, they would only need about 5 days to arrive. The reason why the 4 of them went first was that the space inside the hairpin was limited and could not fit so many people. If he wanted to continuously teleport and travel through space, he would have to expend a huge amount of divine power. The 4 of them had to take turns to replenish the sky-piercing hairpin with divine power. Moreover, with each additional person the consumption of divine power would multiply. If it wasn't for the fact that Bai Feng possessed the divine eyes of annihilation, he would still need to deduce the heavenly secrets to find Ji Tianxing and the others. With God Envoy Zhang Ying's personality, he probably wouldn't even want to bring him along. Hengshan region, Hengshan Empire. In the endless Chang'e mountain range, there was a majestic ancient city that had existed for 10,000 years. It was called Chang'e City. This city was located in a remote area, in a vast mountain range with a radius of a few million miles. Usually, the number of gods and commoners that came to this place was far fewer than the other main cities of the Hengshan Empire. However, Changle City was located on top of a divine vein, so the divine power of heaven and earth was abundant. Chapter 3469. The 100 Refinement Ancient Sect and the Jiang clan had an old grudge that hadn't been resolved even after thousands of years. Although Kenshin had helped the Jiang clan to tide over the crisis and suppress the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect in the past, the Jiang clan was still in danger. However, the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect would never forget this grudge. However, the boundless heaven continent was unified, and the Azura God Emperor controlled the world, desiring to disintegrate the various great ancient clans. The 18 ancient clans had no choice but to form an alliance. The 100 Refinement Ancient Sect could only suppress their hatred and temporarily not fight with the Jiang clan to avoid destroying the ancient clan alliance. But even so, it was inevitable for them to fight in the dark. Jiang Tianxing had left the divine attraction paradise not only to gain experience in the mortal world, but also to take on the mission of recruiting disciples. However, Qinlan was different. He was only using an excuse to leave the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect to settle some old grudges in the Hengshan Empire. Coincidentally, he came to Perpetual Joy City and sensed the aura of a divine king expert. Only then did he find Jiang Tianxing. Then he learned that Jiang Tianxing had recruited 2 refining geniuses, so he wanted to snatch them away. The Jiang clan wanted to absorb new blood, but so did the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect. In fact, the 18 ancient clans had to constantly absorb geniuses from other clans in order to maintain their prosperity for tens of thousands of years. Moreover, Qinlan knew that the 2 geniuses were not on good terms with each other, so she was even more determined to snatch him away. He also found 2 geniuses and used his identity as a disciple of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect to recruit them. Furthermore, he praised the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect to the heavens and banished the Jiang clan to the ground. He wanted to kidnap the 2 geniuses back. However, the 2 geniuses were very stubborn, and were resolutely unwilling to travel with each other. Qinlan could only think of another way. When Jiang Tianxing found out about this, he went to confront Qinlan in a fit of rage. When the 2 of them met, it was inevitable that they would quarrel, ridicule, and humiliate each other. Afterwards, the 2 of them got into a conflict and fought fiercely in the mountains outside the city, destroying tens of thousands of li of mountains and rivers. Qinlan was the second senior brother of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. He had cultivated for 10,000 years and was at the peak of the 6th level of the God King realm. Jiang Tianxing was the 9th young master of the Jiang clan. He had only cultivated for 7,000 years and was at the 5th level of the Divine King realm. The result was obvious. Chapter 3470. Master Grandpa? 7th brother, are you sure? I've never heard that you have such a friend. You didn't manage to recruit any armament refining geniuses and instead found a Master Grandpa for us? Jiang Tianxing regained his senses and was filled with disbelief and unwillingness. He looked at Jiang Tianyi and Ji Tianxing strangely. How can the benefactor who saved the Jiang clan 1,100 years ago be so young? Jiang Tianyi frowned. 9th brother, can you not be so shallow? Isn't it normal for an expert like young Master Tianxing to remain young forever? Jiang Tianxing still didn't believe him and asked again. Since that benefactor could save the Jiang clan and make 2nd uncle and 3rd uncle admire him, he must be at least a peak god king. Even if he isn't a peak god king, he should be a 9th stage realm upper level god king, right? What about this young Master Tianxing? What realm is he at now? Ugh. Jiang Tianyi was speechless and couldn't answer. No choice, he couldn't see through Ji Tianxing's cultivation realm. He could only see that Ji Tianxing's aura was restrained and his power was unfathomable. However, he recalled that Ji Tianxing had fought with Bai Feng for a long time and he wasn't able to defeat her. It was imaginable that Ji Tianxing shouldn't be a upper-level god king. Even if he was, his power should be about the same as Bai Feng, around the 7th stage of the god king realm. This was indeed a suspicious point that couldn't be explained. Jiang Tianxing stared at him and asked, 7th brother, why aren't you talking? Jiang Tianyi frowned and said sternly, 9th brother. How can you be so rude to question someone's cultivation realm? Anyway, you only need to know that young Master Tianxing can deal with Qinlan from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. Really? Jiang Tianxing was still suspicious and sized up Ji Tianxing before asking Jiang Tianyi, Seventh brother, you can't joke about this. Since you're sure that he's the benefactor of the Jiang clan, why didn't you report to the clan leader? Jiang Tianyi stared at him and said, what's the use of reporting to the clan leader? Young Master Tianxing has already agreed to return to the divine attraction paradise with me. At that time I want to give everyone a surprise. Hee hee. Jiang Tianxing put on a fake smile and curled his lips. Anyway, this is your idea. It has nothing to do with me. Don't drag me into it. You. Jiang Tianyi clenched his teeth in anger, wishing he could beat him up. This clearly showed that they didn't believe him and felt that he was fooling around. They were afraid that they would be implicated by him and be punished by the patriarch. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing said indifferently, Jiang Tianxing, whether you believe it or not, let's put this matter aside for now. The most important thing right now is to have Jiang Tianyi accompany you to find Qinlan and resolve this matter as soon as possible. We don't have much time to waste. With his reminder, Jiang Tianyi finally remembered that stellar aspect divine envoy, domain lords and god kings were searching for them. The Hengshan region was right next to the Crimson Dragon region. If they were delayed for too long, there was no guarantee that divine king stellar aspect and company would not come looking for them. Therefore this matter had to be resolved quickly. Yes. Jiang Tianyi hurriedly nodded and said to Jiang Tianxing, ninth brother, where's Qinlan? Let's go find him now. This matter cannot be delayed lest something unexpected happens. Jiang Tianxing pointed to the southwest of Chang'e City and said, that guy is at the Gold Laurel Palace. Alright, let's go meet him now. Jiang Tianyi nodded and pulled Jiang Tianxing into the sky, flying towards Chang'e City. After flying for 1,000 feet, he realized that Ji Tianxing did not follow and was still standing in the manor. Moreover, Ji Tianxing sat back on the stone bench and continued drinking tea. Jiang Tianyi was stunned and asked without hesitation, young Master Tianxing, why aren't you coming with us? Ji Tianxing nodded and smiled. It's enough for the two of you to go. I'll wait here for your good news. This. Jiang Tianyi was immediately put in a difficult position. He smiled bitterly and said, young Master Tianxing, if you don't come with us, I don't feel confident. Jiang Tianxing curled his lips and looked at Ji Tianxing with a smile that was not a smile. He said, you don't dare to go? Are you afraid that if we really fight you'll be exposed? As soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Tianyi slapped him on the back of his head and said unhappily, if you don't know how to speak, then shut up. Jiang Tianxing saw that his seventh brother was really angry and obediently shut up. Jiang Tianyi flew back to the manor and came before Ji Tianxing. He bowed sincerely and said, young Master Tianxing, my ninth brother is young and inexperienced. He has always lived in the divine attraction grotto heaven and this is the first time he has gone out to train. Therefore he spoke without thinking and offended you. Please don't lower yourself to his level. Jiang Tianxing was the ninth genius of the Jiang clan and was called the ninth young master. He had a noble status. In the divine attraction grotto heaven he was used to living like a prince. However, he had lived for 7,000 years and was called young and inexperienced by Jiang Tianyi. Ji Tianxing was speechless. After all, he had lived for less than 2,000 years in both lifetimes. There was no comparison between people. However, since Jiang Tianyi said so, he had to go. Otherwise, it would seem that he was too petty and would really argue with Jiang Tianxing. Helpless, Ji Tianxing could only nod and say, Jiang Tianyi, you misunderstand. Since you insist on inviting me, then I'll go with you. Seeing that he agreed, Jiang Tianyi breathed a sigh of relief. Then the three of them flew through the sky and went straight to the Gold Osmanthus Palace in the southwest of Chang'e City. The sun gradually set and night was about to arrive. The Gold Osmanthus Palace was lit. Qinlan, dressed in a black robe, was sitting in the study and carefully reading a book. He looked like a young man in his 30s. He was tall and muscular with thick eyebrows and big eyes. Behind him stood a white-haired elder in a black robe, dressed like a bodyguard. He stood with his hands by his side. Young Master Lan, this is the detailed information on Lin Zhen and the battle dragon elephant, including the Lin clan and Chang'e Dao College. I have investigated it thoroughly. I think that if we want to recruit these two blacksmithing geniuses, we can find another breakthrough and have a chance. Qinlan nodded and said, okay, then I will take a good look at this information. At this moment, the voice of a guard sounded at the door of the study. Sir, there is a young man with the surname Zhang outside. He wants to see you. Obviously, Only the white-haired elder was from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. He followed Qianlan to serve and protect him. All the guards and maids in the gold Osmanthus Palace were from Chang'an City. However, Qianlan had spent a considerable amount of money to rent this palace temporarily. Jiang Tianxing, that brat is here to humiliate himself again? Qianlan closed the book and put it into his spatial ring. His lips curled into a cold smile. Uncle Yan, let's go see what that brat is up to. With that, he brought Uncle Yan out of the study and rushed to the guest hall. In the hall, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianxing, and Jiang Tianyi were all seated and drinking tea. As soon as Qianlan entered the hall, he laughed mockingly and said, Jiang Tianxing, was the beating from before not enough? Do you want to be beaten again tonight? Chapter 3471. His voice was heard before he even saw him. Qianlan's arrogant tone caused Jiang Tianxing's face to turn green. His eyes were filled with anger. He immediately stood up and retorted coldly, Qianlan, don't be so smug. Tonight my seventh brother will teach you a lesson and let you know the immensity of heaven and earth. As soon as Jiang Tianxing finished speaking, Qianlan appeared in the main hall with the white-robed old man. He glanced at Jiang Tianxing before his gaze landed on Jiang Tianyi and Ji Tianxing. As for Ji Tianxing, he only glanced at him and skipped over him. After all, Ji Tianxing was drinking tea with a calm expression. His aura was restrained and he was as low-key as an ordinary person. On the other hand, Jiang Tianyi's face was stern and his body emitted a divine aura that could not be underestimated. Qianlan sized Jiang Tianyi up and sneered. Did you beat up the small one and then the big one came? Jiang Tianxing, you're really something. You're a piece of trash and you asked your brother to support you? I was wondering why you suddenly became so bold and dared to take the initiative to come here. So it's because you found a backer. As he spoke, Qianlan sat down on the main seat and said disdainfully, It's a pity that your seventh brother Jiang Tianyi is not my match. You guys are destined to be humiliated. Qianlan's words and attitude were extremely arrogant. He did not put Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi in his eyes at all. Jiang Tianyi's face turned green as he clenched his fists tightly. Jiang Tianyi, on the other hand, was calm. He looked at Qianlan with a cold smile and said mockingly, My ninth brother is the youngest among the 9 geniuses of the Jiang clan and is ranked last. You, the second senior brother of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, are proud of defeating him and are still acting so smug. It seems like the disciples of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect are only so capable. What did you say? Qianlan's face darkened and his eyes were filled with anger. Jiang Tianyi laughed even more mockingly and said, Although I'm only ranked 7th among the 9 disciples of the Jiang clan, it's still enough. Against you, the second senior brother of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, it's enough. You dare to look down on me? Qianlan's expression darkened as he growled angrily, Kid, if I don't teach you an unforgettable lesson, you won't know how powerful I am. As he spoke, his entire body burst forth with surging divine power aura. Clearly he was about to attack. But Jiang Tianyi smiled contemptuously and said, Talking to a boor like you is really tiring. Very angry, right? You want to fight, don't you? It's a pity that Lin Zhen and the battle dragon elephant are not going to compete in fighting, but in refining weapons. Qianlan frowned deeply and remained silent. Indeed, he had defeated Jiang Tianxing. A streak of scarlet light soared into the sky, bringing with it a fearful sword radiance. It was like a bloody sun in the sky, illuminating the entire hall red. Within the blood-red light was a broadsword that was about 5 feet long and as wide as a palm. It was emitting a heavy and sacred pressure. This sword wasn't as dignified and divine as Qianlan's golden sword. It was more like a sword of slaughter that could split the heavens and the earth apart. It was filled with an iron-blooded domineering aura and a might that looked down upon all living beings. If Qianlan's work was described as a monarch's sword, then Jiang Tianyi's divine sword would be an overlord's sword. Without a doubt, this sword was also a top-grade low-grade king-grade god artifact. Jiang Tianxing was the first to applaud. He shouted, Did you see that? Seventh brother's divine sword is even more powerful and domineering than yours. Your sword is a woman's sword. Seventh brother's bloody slaughter divine sword is a real man's weapon. Qin Lan's expression didn't look too good as he glared at Jiang Tianxing. Uncle Yen was silent and didn't comment. He was also someone who knew his stuff. Of course he knew that both swords were top grade. It was hard to tell which was better. Lin Jin frowned and didn't say anything. He had to admit that the bloody slaughter divine sword was very impressive. On the other hand, Zhang Longxiang's face was filled with excitement and admiration. His face was flushed red. He didn't say anything, but he was screaming in his heart, "What a peerless divine weapon! This is the sword that I've been dreaming of." The hall fell into a short period of silence. Qin Lan frowned and said, "Jiang Tianyi, everyone's eyes are clear. I'll be fair and objective and say that the bloody slaughter divine sword you refined is also a top-grade weapon. In terms of divine sword quality, you and I are tied. However, you were 15 minutes slower than me. That's the truth. Therefore you still lost." Jiang Tianyi couldn't refute and could only silently put away the bloody slaughter divine sword and divine furnace. But Jiang Tianxing was very unconvinced. He still wanted to quibble but didn't know what to say. The first round ended just like that. Qin Lan looked askance at Jiang Tianyi and said with a cold smile, "How is it? You're not convinced of your loss, right? Want another round? Anyway, it's decided in 3 rounds. You still have 2 chances." Qin Lan was very cunning. Although he had just refined an artifact and used up a lot of divine power. If they continued to compete, his speed would definitely decrease several times. However, Jiang Tianyi was the same as him. His strength and foundation were inferior to his, and his speed would be even slower. If they continued to compete in the second round, Jiang Tianyi would still lose to him. And he would lose even more miserably. Best of 3. Chapter 3474. Previously, Qin Lan and Uncle Yen had suspected Ji Tianxing's identity. However, he kept a low profile and did not attract any attention. Hence, the two of them did not pay much attention to him. However, it was different now. Jiang Tianyi had lost the first round, but he wanted to invite Ji Tianxing to participate in the second round. Moreover, Jiang Tianyi was very respectful towards Ji Tianxing, as if he was facing an elder. However, there was no such young human among the elders, protectors and leaders of the Jiang clan. How could Qin Lan and Uncle Yen not be suspicious? Faced with the two's questioning, Jiang Tianyi frowned and hesitated whether to reveal Ji Tianxing's true identity. At this moment, Ji Tianxing looked at Uncle Yen with a smile and mocked, "Yen Shangao, it's been 1,000 years and you haven't improved at all. Alright, is your illegitimate son still alive? Don't tell me you've decided to kill him for justice?" He paused for a while and muttered to himself, "However, with your character, you'll probably kill your illegitimate son to protect yourself. After all, your wife is a direct descendant of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. If you want to hug the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's thigh, you have to show your determination." Upon hearing this, Uncle Yen, who was still domineering just a moment ago, froze. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. His expression was extremely ugly. His eyes were wide open as he stared fixedly at Ji Tianxing. His eyes were filled with fear. "Who are you? Don't slander me and tarnish my reputation." Uncle Yen was shocked, but he still maintained his rationality and quickly denied it. However, his reaction had already betrayed him. Everyone knew that Ji Tianxing was right. Even Qin Lan was stunned. She looked at Uncle Yen with a strange look in her eyes. Seeing Qin Lan's reaction, Ji Tianxing ignored Uncle Yen and said to Qin Lan, "Second brother Qin, it seems like you don't know Yen Shangao well. This old man used to be the guard commander of the treasury and was a person of high status. However, 1,000 years ago, the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect suddenly announced that he would be stripped of his position and demoted to your housekeeper and guard. Don't you understand what's going on? Maybe you're still feeling complacent and think that the sect thinks highly of you, so you did it on purpose, right?" Qin Lan was at a loss for words. She wanted to retort but she couldn't. Uncle Yan's expression turned even uglier. His eyes were as sharp as swords as he glared at Ji Tianxing. In a low voice he asked, "Boy, who are you?" Ji Tianxing smiled contemptuously and said in an indifferent tone, "Yen Shangao, not to mention you, even if your sect leader Su Bailian was here, he wouldn't dare to be impudent in front of this king." Qin Lan wanted to ask who Ji Tianxing was, But Ji Tianxing's words made his body tense up and his hair stand on end. 1,125 years ago, 3 disciples of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect entered the mysterious nether cave to explore. You were one of them, right? 2 of them died and only you came out alive. Have you found out the cause of their deaths? Although Ji Tianxing seemed to be asking casually, a cold smile appeared on his face. However, there was a cold smile on his lips as he stared at Qinlan with a meaningful look in his eyes. That deep and cold gaze seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Qinlan's heart clenched and cold sweat broke out on his back. Even his expression was a little stiff. Others didn't know the truth, but he was well aware. He was the one who caused the death of one of the disciples. In order to cover up the truth, he killed the other disciple. After escaping the mysterious nether cave, he lied that the 2 disciples were attacked by ferocious beasts and that he had risked his life to escape. The 100 Refinement Ancient sect investigated for a period of time, but nothing was found. Everyone had forgotten about this matter and Qinlan had also thrown it to the back of his mind. Now that Ji Tianxing mentioned it, it seemed like he was reminding him of something. Qinlan immediately became vigilant and fearful. He was afraid that he would expose himself, so he quickly smiled and said, "Young Master Tianxing, you must be joking. The sect has already investigated this matter." Ji Tianxing didn't pursue the matter. He smiled and said, "Can we start the second round now?" Qinlan secretly sighed in relief and quickly nodded. "Yes, of course." Ji Tianxing looked at him from the corner of his eyes and sneered. "You seem to be very guilty. Could it be that paper can't wrap fire and you've exposed yourself?" Qinlan's nerves, which had just relaxed, instantly tensed up again. Her heart thumped. When he saw Uncle Yan's doubtful and scrutinizing gaze, his mind went blank. He stopped breathing and his limbs turned cold. Uncle Yan's face turned red, but he couldn't say a single word of rebuttal. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing both held their stomachs and laughed out loud. Even Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang smiled. The atmosphere in the main hall was finally not so oppressive anymore. Soon the competition between Ji Tianxing and Uncle Yan began. The 2 of them activated the array formation in the divine cauldron and began to adjust the divine flames and the temperature in the cauldron to prepare for the refinement. An hour later, the preparations were complete. The 2 of them took out the materials and added them into the cauldron. The competition was still about refining a king-level low-grade divine artifact. Uncle Yan took out 10 sets of materials to refine a divine sword. Ji Tianxing took out 8 sets of materials to refine a divine armor. Qinlan, Jiang Tianxing, and the others were shocked when they saw the materials used by the 2 of them. They were filled with doubt. That's a king-level low-grade divine artifact. He needs at least 9 sets of materials to succeed. He only used 8 sets. Even Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang looked at Ji Tianxing in a different light. They were looking forward to it. He wants to refine a king-level divine artifact with only 8 sets of materials? It seems like this Tianxing has a special refining technique that's better than Qinlan and Jiang Tianyi's. Out of everyone present, only Jiang Tianyi had a smile on his face. He was already used to it. After that, Ji Tianxing and Uncle Yan both focused on casting their spells and forging tools. Uncle Yan gave it his all. He was especially serious and focused. His nerves were tense. Although he was cannon fodder, Qinlan expected him to lose. But he wanted to prove himself and give it his all. If he beat Ji Tianxing, not only would he be proud, but he would also win the competition and force the Jiang clan out of the competition. Then he would have made a contribution. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing's expression was calm and indifferent. There was a sense of leisure in his concentration. It was as if he wasn't refining artifacts, completing a mission, or competing with others. It was as if he was drinking tea, admiring the moon, and appreciating paintings. His mental state was relaxed. But his hand movements were as smooth as flowing water. It was too fast for the eyes to take in, and it was accurate. He used different methods in the early, middle, and late stages of refining the divine armor. They were all refining techniques that no one had ever heard of before. They were mysterious and profound. Qinlan, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhen, and Zhang Longxiang stared at him. Their eyes were filled with amazement and admiration. Especially Zhang Longxiang. His eyes were burning and his heart was filled with adoration. Time passed quickly and no one noticed. Unknowingly, 7 days had passed. Ji Tianxing finally finished his refinement and stopped his work. His expression was still calm and there wasn't even a bead of sweat on his forehead. He looked especially relaxed. After he finished refining, he didn't say anything. He just sat on the spot and closed his eyes, waiting silently. The ninth heaven cauldron that was spinning quickly also stopped. It floated motionlessly. Seeing him do that, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhen, and Zhang Longxiang all looked at Qinlan. Qinlan was embarrassed. He was too ashamed to show his face. After all, he was very proud of himself after refining the artifact. He even mocked and harassed Jiang Tianyi. Compared to Ji Tianxing's actions, he was a despicable person. Ji Tianxing had the demeanor of a grandmaster and the bearing of a divine blacksmith. Embarrassed by everyone's gazes, Qinlan could only change the topic. He pursed his lips and said, "So what if his refining techniques are fancy? Didn't he use 7 days just like me? Even if he were to compete with me, we would only be able to tie." No one said anything. They couldn't refute him. After that, the crowd waited for another 12 hours before Uncle Yan finally completed the refinement. Phew! After he stopped, Uncle Yan let out a sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeve. His face was a little pale and he looked a little tired. He said to Qinlan, "Young Master Lan, I didn't let you down. I've finished refining." Qinlan forced a smile. "Uncle Yan, you've worked hard. However, young Master Tianxing finished refining 12 hours ago." Uncle Yan was stunned. He said dejectedly, "I didn't expect that I would still lose after giving it my all." Qinlan hurriedly comforted him. "Don't worry. Let's wait until everyone sees your work. Perhaps your artifact will be more exquisite than his?" Uncle Yan nodded and opened the cauldron lid. Wonderful book house. Chapter 3476. Swoosh. The lid of the cauldron opened and a white rainbow flew into the air. A 4-foot-long sword was wrapped in the dazzling white rainbow. The sword was blazing white and had a dignified appearance. It rippled with a vigorous divine power aura. It contained 100 types of divine Dao laws and 1,000 types of divine formations and restrictions. Compared to Qinlan and Jiang Tianyi's works, this sword could only be considered average and not outstanding. Qinlan was a little disappointed. He had already guessed the outcome. However, he still had a trace of hope. He looked at Ji Tianxing and said, "Young Master Tianxing, it's your turn." Ji Tianxing did not waste any time. He waved his hand and opened the lid of the 9 heavens cauldron. Swoosh! A dazzling icy blue divine light bloomed from the cauldron and slowly rose into the air. The entire hall was illuminated with an icy blue color. It was like a palace of ice and snow. Following the appearance of an exquisite and gorgeous divine armor, the entire hall turned into a hall of extreme cold. Frost formed everywhere. Everyone ignored the bone-piercing cold. They stared at the icy blue armor and observed it carefully. This divine armor is too beautiful. This should be for a woman to wear, right? Jiang Tianxing exclaimed from the bottom of his heart. It's so exquisite and gorgeous. The patterns on the armor are also original. It's really admirable. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang were excited. Their expressions were filled with admiration and worship. Even Qinlan had to admit that this divine armor was indeed a divine item. It was a 1 in 1,000 masterpiece. Jiang Tianyi observed it carefully for a while before saying, "It's really a low-grade king-grade divine artifact. And it's a supreme grade one. Whether it's the difficulty of refining or the quality, it far surpasses the bloody slaughter sword that I refined and the sword that Qinlan refined." Jiang Tianyi was sincerely impressed. However, before he could finish, Qinlan said indignantly, "I don't deny that it surpasses your bloody slaughter sword. However, it surpasses my divine sword. Are you sure?" Jiang Tianyi turned to look at him and nodded expressionlessly. "I'm very sure. First of all, refining an armor is more complicated and time-consuming than a divine sword. Secondly, young Master Tianxing only used 8 sets of materials. You used 9 sets. This is enough to prove that young Master Tianxing's attainments in refining artifacts are superior to yours. Most importantly, take a closer look at this divine armor. How many laws and restrictions does it contain?" Qinlan was stunned. She looked at the ice blue divine armor again and observed it carefully. After a short moment, his figure shook while his expression stiffened, and he couldn't help but exclaim with shock. 130 divine crests of the laws? More than 1,300 restrictions? Oh my god. It's only been 7 days, how could he? Qinlan was completely dumbfounded. He was so shocked that his blood was boiling and his entire body was burning. At this moment, winning or losing was no longer important. He just wanted to know how Ji Tianqing did it. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang were also stunned. They looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of respect and admiration. The hall fell into silence. Uncle Yen put away the divine cauldron and divine sword. He broke the silence and said in a low voice, "We have lost the second round." His words woke everyone up. Only then did Qinlan come back to his senses. He regained his confidence and composure and grinned. Even if young Master Tianqing won, it's nothing. It's all within my expectations anyway. Now that we are tied, we have to wait for the third round to determine the winner. With that said, Qinlan looked at Jiang Tianyi provocatively and curled his finger. Jiang Tianyi, my divine power and condition have both recovered to their peak. You can admit defeat in advance. Jiang Tianyi immediately frowned and his expression became serious. That's right. So what if Ji Tianqing won the first round? He still had to go up for the third round and have a final battle with Qinlan. He had only recovered 90% and was not at his peak condition. It was very, very difficult to win against Qinlan. Jiang Tianyi was originally very happy, but when he thought of this problem he became depressed. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang also looked at Jiang Tianyi, waiting for him to make a decision. Should he compete with Qinlan and lose? Or should he save his energy and time and admit defeat directly? Just as everyone was waiting for Jiang Tianyi to make a decision, a calm voice sounded. The third round will still be mine. Everyone was stunned for a moment and turned their heads. Without a doubt, the person who spoke was Ji Tianqing. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi both frowned and asked worriedly, "Young Master Tianqing, aren't you going to rest for a few days?" Although the two of them said the same thing, their thoughts were different. Jiang Tianyi was worried that Ji Tianqing's continuous forging of divine weapons would damage his foundation of the divine path. Jiang Tianyi, on the other hand, was worried that Ji Tianqing would lose to Qinlan due to his lack of strength in the third round. Qinlan raised his eyebrows and asked with a playful smile, "Young Master Tianqing, your forging skills are indeed extraordinary. However, you have just finished forging a divine weapon. Are you sure you want to continue? Don't say that I took advantage of you by not letting you rest and recuperate. You asked for it yourself." Clearly, Qinlan was not worried about losing at all. If Jiang Tianyi participated in the third round, he would definitely lose. If Ji Tianqing continued, he would not have much chance of winning in a situation where he did not have enough divine power and was mentally exhausted. No matter what, Qinlan was sure to win. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said indifferently, "It's only been 7 days. I didn't use much divine power. Do I still need to rest and recuperate?" Qinlan choked on her words and said in exasperation, "Fine. Since you are so confident, let's wait and see." Jiang Tianyi wanted to persuade Ji Tianqing but was stopped by Jiang Tianyi. He transmitted his voice to Jiang Tianyi. "Ninth brother, young Master Tianqing's strength and methods are far beyond our imagination. Since he is so confident, we will definitely win." Jiang Tianyi was skeptical. After hesitating for a long time, he finally acquiesced. On the other side, Uncle Yen reminded Qinlan, "Young Master Lan, that kid's forging skills are so shocking. You must not let your guard down." Qinlan nodded to show that he understood and said with a smile, "If I had competed with him just now, I would definitely have lost. His forging skills are indeed brilliant. However, he has just finished forging a divine weapon. His divine power must be empty and his mind exhausted. I, on the other hand, am in peak condition. Why should I be afraid of losing to him?" Uncle Yen was speechless. He could only remind him, "In any case, young Master Lan, you must give it your all." "Right, I understand." Qinlan waved his hand and walked to the main hall to sit down. He took out the divine cauldron and looked at Ji Tianqing opposite him. "Shall we begin?" Ji Tianqing raised his hand and said, "Wait. This third round will determine the winner. If we compete like this, it will be too monotonous." Qinlan frowned. "What? You know that your divine power is insufficient and want to change the rules?" Ji Tianqing smiled and said, It's boring to just forge a low-grade king-level divine weapon. Why don't we upgrade the divine weapon we just forged to mid-grade? Upgrade a low-grade divine weapon? Qinlan frowned and pondered seriously. After weighing the pros and cons, he gritted his teeth and made a decision. Fine. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, why don't we add some stakes? Otherwise it will be boring for everyone to watch. Book Guest House Reading Website. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.